Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of the people who watch these videos aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this kind of content, consider hitting the subscribe button. It really helps a lot, and it keeps these long stories going. Also, I'd love to hear from you. What time is it right now where you are, and which city are you listening from tonight? And if these stories help you sleep, feel free to tap the thanks button to support the channel. It truly means a lot. All right, let's get into it. I clipped the mic to my lapel and killed the siren, letting the patrol car's engine settle into a low rumble. It was October 3rd, 2021, just after 1:15 a.m. The glow of my dash lights illuminated the mist rolling in from the coastal foothills. Damp, dense fog that seemed to seep through every crack in the windshield. I was on County Route 128 in Mendocino County, Oregon. A ribbon of asphalt flanked on both sides by ancient Douglas firs, so tall they appeared to stab at the sky. The air in the cabin tasted like cold metal and pine, and my breath puffed out in small clouds as I exhaled. My name is Deputy Laura West, badge number 3724, and I've done this route more nights than I care to count. But that night felt different. There was a weight in the fog, like unseen eyes watching from between the tree trunks. My radio crackled softly, untuned. No dispatcher, no fellow officers. Just static that built into a low-frequency hum almost like a heartbeat. I flicked on the spotlight and swept it across the shoulder of the road. There, the dark silhouette of an SUV parked at mile marker 42, driver's door ajar, no hazard lights, no plates. I eased the patrol car closer, tires crunching on gravel, and cut the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. No owl calls, no rustling underbrush, just the faint drip of moisture from wet branches. I unholstered my flashlight, pocketed my radio mic, and stepped into the mist. The beams from my flashlight cut through the fog in swirls, illuminating glistening ferns and scattered pine cones. Each step felt muffled in the soft, saturated earth. I approached the SUV cautiously, hand hovering near my holster. The vehicle's interior was pitch black. I tapped on the glass with 3 sharp knocks. "Deputy West, Mendocino County Sheriff's Office," I called out, voice echoing oddly among the trees. "Is anyone inside?" Only the echo answered me. I circled the SUV, scanning for footprints or discarded items. Muddy tracks led from the driver's door toward the forest, but vanished after a few feet. I crouched and inspected the ground. Nothing but twig fragments and damp earth. No shoe imprints, no blood. My pulse quickened. I rose and peered through the tinted rear window. The seats were empty, the seatbelts undisturbed. I clicked on the interior dome light. Nothing. The bulb flickered once, then died. Cold seeped into my bones. I rifled through the glove compartment with gloved hands. Half-empty bottles of water, an old map of coastal trails, and a pack of cigarettes. All unremarkable, except for the absence of any personal identification. My radio sprang to life in a burst of static, then fell silent again. I squeezed the mic button. "Dispatch, this is West. I have an..." The speaker crackled, repeating my words back at me in a slowed, distorted tone. "I have an..." I let the button go, heart thudding. That wasn't normal. I swallowed hard and tried again, but the radio emitted only static and a whisper that sounded like my own breath. Behind me, a twig snapped. I spun, flashlight beam swinging through the trees. Nothing moved, but the darkness felt heavy, as if something crouched just beyond the edge of the light. "Hey," I called. "Show yourself." My voice came out nothing but a brittle rasp. I took a cautious step back toward the patrol car, then hesitated. The passenger door on the SUV creaked closed of its own accord, as though someone had gently swung it shut. I watched the handle swing down with my flashlight trained on it. No one was there. Adrenaline surged. I switched off the dome light entirely and holstered my flashlight, drawing my sidearm instead. The metal felt reassuring in my hand. I edged closer to the rear of the SUV, careful to keep the patrol car in my peripheral vision. The forest was silent now, but silence had a way of twisting into something sinister at night. I reached the rear hatch and placed both hands on the cold metal. With a swift tug, I popped it open. My flashlight beam swept the cargo area, empty, save for a single folded blanket. The edges were frayed and damp, embroidered with a floral pattern that stood out against the darkness. No sign of struggle, no discarded items. Only that blanket, folded as neatly as if someone had set it there intentionally. A sudden gust of wind rattled the hatch, making the blanket shift. I leaned forward to inspect it closer, my flashlight revealing nothing underneath. My reflection in the hatch glass stared back at me, pale and wide-eyed. For a moment, I saw something behind me in that reflection, a shape darker than the night. Then it vanished as I turned around. My heart leapt into my throat. I backed away, slammed the hatch shut, and flicked on my radio's emergency channel. Static. Nothing. I toggled through channels. 3-1, 4-7, 6-5, no response. My backup was more than 20 minutes away and cell service was non-existent out here. I made the split-second decision to search the nearby woods. If someone was out here, hurt or in danger, I owed it to them to try. I pocketed my wallet, badge, and ID inside, and left my patrol car running, lights off. The beams from the SUV's headlights vanished as I walked away, swallowed by the forest. The undergrowth was thick. My boots sank into damp moss. The only sounds were my breathing, sharp and uneven, and the crackle of fallen needles underfoot. My flashlight cut a narrow cone of light ahead. Every rock and root cast a long, twisted shadow. Then I heard it. A soft, muffled sob. I froze. The sound came from somewhere uphill, maybe 50 yards away. I called out, "Hey, I'm here to help. If you're okay, I'm here." The sobbing stopped. My flashlight darted from side to side, but saw nothing. I moved toward where I thought the sound had come from, hand on my holster. Another sob, closer now. So close I felt the vibration through the soles of my boots. I stopped at the edge of a small clearing. A single beam of moonlight pierced the canopy, spotlighting a patch of ferns. And there, crouched at the center, was a woman wearing that same floral blanket I'd seen in the SUV. She rocked back and forth, shoulders shaking, long hair matted with dirt. Her face was hidden, but my gut told me she'd been crying for hours. I took a careful step forward. "Ma'am?" I said quietly, holstering my weapon. "Deputy West, are you hurt?" She looked up slowly. Her eyes were rimmed in red, pupils dilated. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a dry rasp emerged. "Help me." Her voice shattered the heavy silence. I took another step, but a sudden snap of a twig behind me made me spin. And there, just beyond my flashlight beam, stood a figure so tall I couldn't make out its head. Dark shape in darker woods. I raised my voice. "Hey, come out with your hands up." No response. The woman in the clearing scrambled to her feet and back toward me, hair whipping. Ash across her tear-streaked face. I glanced back at the figure. It hadn't moved, but now it seemed to have shoulders, arms hanging at its sides. My pulse raced. There was no shape on the ground, no footprints leading to this spot. I looked at the woman, wide-eyed, and then back at the darkness. The figure blended into the trees like part of them. The woman grabbed my arm, her grip ice cold. "We need to go, now!" Her voice trembled. "They'll kill us." I swallowed and tried to steady my breathing. "Who's going to—" A crashing sound erupted from the trees above, like branches ripping apart. The woman screamed and yanked me forward. I stumbled toward the road, adrenaline flooding my veins. Behind us, the dark figure stepped forward, tall and impossibly still, then vanished into the fog as if swallowed by the night itself. We burst from the tree line, the patrol car's engine humming. I threw the door open and yanked her inside. As I spun into the driver's seat, she leaned across me, trembling. "Leave. Don't look back." My flashlight beam danced over the road ahead, empty, silent. I slammed the car into drive and peeled away, tires spitting gravel. In my rearview mirror, the woods were still, but I could have sworn I saw 2 points of faint, glowing light high among the branches before they too disappeared. My radio crackled to life with my own voice. "Dispatch, It cut off into static, then stuttered, "I'm safe." We sped into the darkness, neither of us speaking. Yet, in that silence, we both knew the forest wasn't done with us. The tires screamed against loose gravel as I tore down County Route 128, the figure's warning echoing in my mind. "They'll kill us." In the passenger seat, she trembled so badly the door rattled, and I could smell the coppery tang of her fear. I kept glancing at her through the rear view, but the darkness swallowed her features. Every time I flicked on the interior light, it stuttered and died, as if some unseen hand were throttling the circuits. I punched the siren on briefly, a desperate plea for any other patrol car within miles to hear me, then cut it off again. The road curved ahead, slick with mist, and I could see the glow of the small town of Comch up on the ridge. 6 dim street lamps, a single gas station, a shuttered diner with neon long since burned out. I aimed for that lifeline. When I finally skidded into the gas station parking lot, I killed the engine and sat there a moment, panting. My heart felt like it was trying to claw its way out of my chest. The woman unbuckled herself almost mechanically and flung open the door, bolting toward the single-row motel across the road. I followed, weapon drawn, ready for anything. She darted inside a room 4, the latch clicking behind her. I radioed dispatch on my handheld, using the emergency channel, my finger shaking on the PTT button. "Dispatch, this is West. I've got a civilian, possible victim, requesting immediate backup and medical. Location, Redwood Crest Motel, room 4. The handset crackled, then a voice finally answered, crisp and professional. "Copy that, Unit 3724, backup en route, ETA 10 minutes. Do you have suspect description?" I exhaled, unclenching my jaw. "Negative. Unknown suspect. Possible multiple. Caller is unstable. I'll await backup before further investigation." I eased my way into the room, lights off, flashlight sweeping the narrow corridor. The woman sat on the edge of the bed, knees pulled to her chest, blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. She looked up at me, hollow eyes reflecting the beam. I kept my voice low. "Ma'am, you're safe now. I need you to tell me exactly what happened." She swallowed hard, lip quivering. I ran when I saw it. I thought it was just me out there, but then the radio, it said my name, and I saw a face in the darkness, Deputy, a face that wasn't human. Her words tumbled out between sobs. I knelt beside her and set my hand gently on hers, careful not to jostle her blanket. "You did the right thing. You're okay here. Backup's on the way." I glanced at the clock above the motel door, 2:02 a.m. Outside, a highway patrol cruiser's flashing lights pulsed through the dusty window. 2 officers in green jackets and a paramedic in navy scrubs hustled toward me. I rose and stepped out into the autumn air. In the parking lot, I briefed them as they set up a perimeter. The paramedic led the woman away to check her over. The other deputy scanned the tree line with a flashlight. I walked over to where I'd left the patrol car running and found the driver's door ajar, the engine still idling. My radio lay on the passenger seat, the emergency channel keyed open. My distorted voice faintly looping, "I'm safe. I'm safe." One of the patrol officers snapped a latex glove over his hand and pointed to the ground. "Deputy, we found this." He held up a small, rusted key ring with a single key attached, the handle bent like it had been yanked. "Found it half buried in the gravel." I took the key, fingers numb, and examined it. No tag, no identifier, just a single cut that matched no standard lock. We returned to the motel room. The woman was sitting in a chair, shivering under a wool blanket they'd provided. She looked up as I entered, eyes red. "What is that?" she asked, voice trembling. I showed her the key. "Did you carry this with you tonight?" She shook her head. It wasn't mine." By the time the coroner's unit arrived to dust for prints and photograph the SUV's last known GPS ping, we'd learned 3 startling things. The SUV had never registered in any state database. The warrant check on the VIN came back empty. And, most unsettling, the vehicle's GPS coordinates had jumped from mile marker 42 to this motel in under 1 minute, a distance that should have taken at least 8. I filed the preliminary report back at the station, hands still trembling as I typed. The woman's statement described the fog swallowing the road, the disembodied voice, the silhouette in the trees, every detail matching my own experience. My report ended with a simple notation: "Investigation pending. Possible paranormal activity unconfirmed." I drove home in silence, headlights cutting through mist so thick I had to slow to 20 miles per hour. My house was on a quiet cul-de-sac, a modest ranch with yellow porch lights. I let myself in, tossing keys on the kitchen counter, and paused in the doorway as the radio in the living room flickered on by itself. The announcer voice greeted me. "You're listening to K-Morning News. It's now 4:17 a.m. I switched it off, pulse hammering. Sleep eluded me. Every noise, a creak in the floorboards, the wind rustling the curtains, made me bolt upright. My dreams were filled with that endless forest, the shape in the trees, the woman's pleading eyes. I woke, gasping at dawn, soaked in sweat and disoriented, as if I'd been running for miles through brambles. I shouldered my gear that evening for the next patrol, hands still shaky. County Route 128 called again. By now, I knew the empty road, the silent woods, the way the fog moved like living things. I left extra batteries in my flashlight, made a point of testing the radio at every mile marker, and carried 2 cans of pepper spray just in case. As I cruised into the dusk-changed shadows, I recited the procedures. Keep backup in sight, maintain radio contact, don't pursue unknown figures alone. I reminded myself, I'm a trained officer, not a civilian. This is just a call like any other. But when the headlights cut through the mist and the pine scent grew thick, I felt that old weight settle back on my chest. Night fell into deep blue, and the road winked with reflective markers. I passed mile marker 42, exactly as the clock turned 11:37 p.m. The SUV wasn't there, of course it wasn't. Below a gap in the trees, I thought I saw movement, but it was only a deer slipping into darkness. I exhaled, then my radio crackled. "West, come in." "West, are you copy?" I hit the mic. "Dispatch, go ahead." Static. Then a voice, garbled, distant, saying, "Help! Please, don't leave." My heart stuttered. I looked over the dashboard, but there was no one in the passenger seat. My flashlight lay on the floorboard, batteries dead. The rearview mirror was empty. I shut my eyes tight, then opened them. The road stretched ahead, silent and unremarkable, but I knew with sudden certainty that the forest was waiting, and this time it wouldn't let me drive away so easily. The night air tasted of damp pine and diesel as I flagged down the lone highway patrol cruiser for a quick radio check, but the speaker crackled and died. I leaned back against my door, hands pressed flat against the cold metal, and closed my eyes. The faint glow of my dashboard clock read 00:12 a.m. I'd been on this shift for more than 15 hours straight, chasing down false alarms and dead-end trespassing calls. But after what happened out there, nothing felt routine anymore. I restarted the engine with an extra long turn of the key, and the muscle memory of shifting into drive was almost comforting. My knuckles whitened on the wheel as I eased back onto County Route 128. The fog lay heavy just above the pavement, swirling around the headlights like living smoke. My radio keys rattled against the console, and I resisted the urge to tune every channel again. As I rounded a gentle curve, the faint beam of my spotlight caught movement at the edge of the woods, too slight to be deer. Something crouched, its limbs folded strangely, like a slumped mannequin stripped of life. I slammed on the brakes. The cruiser screeched to a halt, pebbles spraying behind the tires. I switched off the engine. Silence, so thick it pressed against my eardrums. My flashlight lay in its holster. I unbuckled, stepped out, and crouched behind the driver's door. Rain had begun to spatter lightly, each drop ringing sharp on the roof. I swallowed and clicked the flashlight on. It pierced the fog in a tight beam. Nothing. The underbrush shuddered, as if something large had shifted weight, then fell still. "Who's there?" I shouted, voice breaking the silence like a bullet. My words scattered among the trees. The beam clicked across ferns, redwood bark, and one lone wildflower, petals bent by the night air. Another movement, two glowing points, low to the ground, rising until they were shoulder height. I jumped back, heart thundering. A man stepped into the beam, thin, clad in a soaked black hoodie, jeans streaked with mud. His eyes reflected the light, wide and unblinking. I instinctively reached for my sidearm. "Deputy West," I said, voice steadier than I felt. "What are you doing out here?" He blinked once, then twice, throat bobbing as he swallowed. I was following her," he rasped, voice hollow. "Who?" I leveled my flashlight at his chest. He took a trembling step forward. "Her," he repeated. "You haven't seen her?" His gaze flitted past me into the forest. "My partner?" I asked, confusion twisting in my gut. "What partner?" He closed his eyes and shook his head as though waking from a nightmare. "She's here, the one who called for help." His voice cracked. "We can't leave her." I forced my gaze off him and into the trees. "There's no one else here," I said. He took another step, closer, and breath hitched in my chest. "She needs you." I trained the beam on his face. The rain had plastered his hair to his forehead. Dark circles ringed his eyes. His hands curled into fists at his sides. "Get back," I ordered. "Get back to your car and stay put." He opened his mouth, closed it, then stumbled backward and turned away. I watched until his figure blurred into the mist. My finger hovered over the radio button, but I killed the urge to call it in. There was no sense. Nothing to report but a man lost in the fog. I climbed back into the cruiser, heart still racing. My pulse throbbed in my temples. I tried the ignition, dead. The engine churned once, then silence. I slammed the steering column in frustration. My radio crackled to life with laughter. My laughter, distorted and childlike, echoing through the cabin. I slammed the handset back into its cradle. Lightning split the sky overhead, illuminating the trees in a flash of white. The hooded man appeared at the passenger window, pressed close enough that I could see breaths fogging the glass. I twisted in my seat to aim my flashlight at the window, empty. Instinct kicked in. I sprinted down the road, soaked boots skidding on wet gravel, every muscle screaming. I didn't look back. My breath came in ragged bursts as I plunged deeper into the darkness, heartsick and desperate for help. After 10 minutes, forever, I glimpsed lights ahead. A second cruiser, its blue lamps slicing through the murk. I threw my hand up, stumbling onto the pavement. The officer inside held his radio mic, eyebrows slanted in concern. "He's out here," I gasped, nodding into the trees. "Somebody—" Before I could finish, the passenger door of the cruiser swung open. The hooded man stepped out, dragging something behind him, a blanket-wrapped shape slumping at his side. They were both too soaked to move quickly, and as I reached them I realized with chill that the blanket was identical to the one from the SUV. The hooded man dropped to his knees and unwrapped the bundle. A limp arm fell free, pale and slick with rain. I recoiled. My stomach lurched at the sight of her. No, it wasn't the missing woman. It was someone else, someone I didn't know, eyes closed and lips parted in a silent gasp. "Who is she?" I demanded, stepping back. The officer crossed his arms. "No idea," he said quietly. "This guy came out of nowhere, asked for help." I raised my flashlight again, looking from the body to the hooded man's face. But the hood had fallen back, revealing my own features. His face was mine, every line, every freckle mirrored exactly. He stared at me with my eyes. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet, and landed hard on gravel. My radio mic skittered out of reach. The hooded double knelt and spoke in my voice. "You should have stayed away." Lightning cracked again, and in that harsh glare, the body on the ground convulsed, arms jerking like a puppet on frayed strings. A high-pitched giggle, my giggle, rattled the air. I scrambled to my feet and back toward the cruiser, hands shaking. The hooded figure rose, blanket slipping from his arm to reveal a twisted, faceless head, smooth, pale, like bleached bone. Where eyes should have been were deep, empty pits. "Help me," the body on the ground whispered, my voice broken, pleading. And then everything went silent. The rain stopped. The fog lifted as if sucked back into some unseen well. The hooded double drifted forward, reaching a finger-bone hand toward me. I pressed my back against the cruiser door, eyes wide with horror. The other officer called, "Out," stepping toward me. His voice distant like it wasn't real. The double leaned down and whispered into the unconscious body's ear, "He'll never leave." The body's chest heaved in a single violent breath. Its eyes snapped open, pitch-black orbs that reflected the midnight sky. It turned its head toward me, snapping its jaw in a dry, hollow crack. I raised my weapon and fired once. Silence, no shout, no movement. The hooded figure and the body both collapsed to the gravel, melting into shadow. As I lowered my pistol, the only sound was the thunder rolling away. My radio chimed to life one last time. "Deputy West, you copy?" I reached down, pressing the button, but before I could speak, the radio drifted back into static. Then it whispered, "I'm safe. I'm safe." I didn't answer. Instead, I backed away, heart pounding, and ran. Down the road, past mile marker 42, through the oily mist, until the lights of the station came into view. Inside, I turned in my weapon and my badge. I told them everything I could, but the rest I left unspoken, locked in that dark stretch of forest. At sunrise, I returned to the road, alone, to look for footprints, for any sign that it had been real. But all I found was empty asphalt, wet pine needles, and the echo of my own footsteps fading into the fog. And some nights when the wind rattles the windows and the radio crackles to life with nothing but static, I hear that giggle, my giggle, twisting through the dark, reminding me that the forest never forgets, and it never lets go. What happens when the ones we save become the ones we fear? I woke to the sound of my own breathing, rapid, shallow gasps that echoed against the ceiling of my bedroom. The digital clock on my nightstand glowed 3:07 a.m. The rain hammered against the window panes like machine gun fire. I sat up, every muscle taut, convinced I'd heard footsteps pacing outside my door. The badge I'd turned in lay on the dresser, gleaming under a single lamp. Something inside me refused to let it rest there. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and padded across the hardwood floor, the chill of the board seeping through my socks. I lifted the badge, turned it in my hand, and felt the weight of it. More than metal and enamel, but everything I was and everything I'd lost. I slipped it into my pocket and grabbed my jacket. Outside, the county roads were slick and miry. The patrol car sat in the driveway, engine cold, its roof streaked with raindrops that reflected the street lamp's orange glow. I got in and hit the ignition. The engine hesitated, coughed, then sprang to life. My chest tightened, like the forest itself was holding its breath, and I eased out onto Route 128. The road stretched into an indistinct gray smear beneath my headlights. The fog had rolled back in thick and heavy, hugging the asphalt and blurring the lines. I kept the speed under 30, ears straining for any hint of movement beyond the wiper's mechanical squeak. Every reflective marker was a pair of eyes watching me, waiting. I passed mile marker 42 again without incident. No phantom SUVs, no wailing voices. I felt relief wash through me at first, until I caught that single, high-pitched giggle on the wind, the same that had rung in my ears when I fired my service weapon at nothing. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. I pulled over, killed the engine, and stepped into the rain. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I walked to the roadside forest line. The trees loomed overhead, towering like silent judges. I clicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting a narrow corridor into the darkness, and followed the muddy tracks I found there. Fresh, leading into the woods where none should exist. The tracks were small, like a woman's boots, but the spacing was unnatural. Too long between steps, as if the person had been floating or lunging through the undergrowth. I leaned down to inspect them, pressing my finger into the soggy earth. One print had no heel, just the front of a shoe, as though the person had kicked off mid-stride. I heard a voice behind me, my own voice, calling my name soft and urgent. "Deputy West, Deputy West." I snapped around, flashlight darting across trunks and low branches. Nothing moved, no echo, only the gentle patter of rain on needle-covered ground. My radio sprang to life then, on its own, breathing static. I grabbed it, holding it close. "West to dispatch," I said, voice steady despite the racing in my chest. The speaker burst with laughter, low, mocking, and unmistakably my own. I slammed the radio down, heart hammering, and backed away from the tracks. A shape detached itself from the trees ahead, stepping into the beam. Tall and slender, wrapped in that same floral blanket, drenched and caked with mud. Her hair was plastered to her face. The woman from the clearing, though her eyes were black voids, not flesh. I tried to scream, but no sound came. She lifted a hand and pointed down the path, where another shape emerged. The hooded double, face still identical to mine, only more gaunt. He held something in his hand. A tarnished key, identical to the one we found at the motel. He jangled it slowly, as metronomic as a ticking clock. I forced my trembling legs to move, backing toward my cruiser. The woman advanced, feet sliding in the mud. The double moved as well, step for step, until we were flanked on both sides by spectral versions of my own colleagues. They whispered in unison, my voice, hers, theirs, borrowing tones and syllables. You can't leave. You belong here. Stay. Rain splashed at my face. I fumbled for the car door handle. The woman reached out, pale fingers inches from my arm. I yanked the door open and dove inside, slamming it shut. I turned the key, nothing but a click. The engine was dead again. In the rearview mirror, I saw them all. The woman, the double, and dozens more. Ghostly officers wearing my face. All of us gathered like a courtroom out there in the trees. My badge lay on the passenger seat just out of reach. The hooded figures closed in, stepping on the asphalt, one after the other. Their numbers growing until every reflective stripe on their jackets glowed sickly under my headlights. I reached into my jacket pocket for my pistol, my actual service weapon, not a replica, and cocked it with a single, desperate motion. I aimed at the windshield where the nearest blank-faced figure stood. I squeezed the trigger, expecting the crack of a round. Instead, my gun clicked on an empty chamber. I'd left it in the station. Behind me, a new voice, clear, familiar, softly mocking. Deputy West, it was dispatch, my dispatch. The radio repeated. Deputy West, do you copy? I snatched it up, stabbed at the PTT button. Dispatch, get me. Static. And then the radio snapped off, leaving only the hum of the foghorn pulse of my own racing heart. The windshield filled with pale faces, inches away. I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them again, they were gone. The rain had stopped. The trees stood silent, as if untouched by time or terror. The tracks in the mud were erased, as though they'd never existed. My breath came in great, ragged gasps. I unlatched the door and climbed out onto the road. No patrol car behind me, no cloak of officers, no sign of the woman. Only County Road Marker 42, serene in the headlight beam as if daring me to approach. I stepped forward, boots crunching on gravel. The air smelled of pine and ozone. The road stretched into darkness on either side. I looked back at my cruiser. License plate missing, patrol insignia peeled away, windows fogged over from the inside. In my hand, I still held the radio. I keyed it once and let it go. The speaker crackled. You're safe. The words drifted out slow and torn. I slid the radio into my pocket and left the car behind, walking into the fog. Every instinct screamed to run, but something deeper, something hungry, pulled me forward. The forest floor was soft beneath my steps, welcoming. In the distance, I heard the faint strains of my own laughter echo through the trees, darker and colder than any voice of man. And as I disappeared into the mist, I realized I had become the call for help no one could answer. What do you do when the line between rescuer and lost is no longer clear? I took a single step into the fog, and immediately the scent of pine grew so strong it was like breathing through a straw stuffed with needles. My boots sank into the soft earth, and I could feel the cold moisture seeping through the soles. The patrol car's taillights vanished behind me, leaving only swirling white mist and the dull ache in my chest where the fog pressed against my lungs. Every nerve in my body screamed to turn back, but I couldn't. Something deeper, something hollow and yearning, drew me forward. The trees here felt ancient, their trunks gnarled and swollen, roots twisting above the ground like skeletal hands. As I pushed through a thicket of ferns, my flashlight beam caught a glimpse of fabric tangled in the underbrush. That same faded floral blanket. It lay draped over a branch, half buried in loam. I hesitated, then knelt and picked it up. The material was damp and heavy, and as I unfurled it, I saw it was stained with dark patches. Blood, I knew without needing to tell myself. My hands trembled so badly, I dropped it back. The blanket vanished into the mist as if it had never been. My radio, now heavy in my coat pocket, crackled without me touching it. I yanked it out, fingers brushing wet metal. The speaker spat static, then a woman's voice whispered, "Don't follow," dragging out the vowels until they were ragged. I keyed the mic reflexively, but nothing came through, not even my own voice. I jammed it back and kept walking, trusting only my own heartbeat. The path narrowed. Low-hanging limbs scraped at my shoulders, and I tilted my head sideways to slip beneath them. Every step felt deliberate, electric. The soft crunch of needles underfoot, the sudden hush as even the wind seemed to die when I passed. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a child's laughter, high-pitched, warbling, like a music box wound crooked. My pulse slammed in my ears. I spun my flashlight in circles but saw nothing, only trees. I pressed on, panic coloring every breath, until the ground dipped and opened into a small clearing. In the center stood the abandoned SUV, headlights on this time, but the light was cold and gray, like moonlight filtered through smoke. The doors were ajar, and the engine ticked as if cooling. On the hood lay a single shoe, a battered work boot, scuffed and broken. I stepped toward it, and the flashlight caught a smear of mud on the windshield, a handprint smeared downward, as though someone had been dragged across the glass. I rushed forward. The boot thudded against my foot. I looked up, expecting to see the missing woman, but there was no one. The clearing was empty. I leaned in, pressing my palm against the SUV's hood, metal, damp and cold. The radio in my pocket crackled, this time with the roar of the engine I'd left behind. I zipped my coat against the cold and straightened, hearing footsteps all around me, circling, like rocks tumbling slowly down a hill. My light trembled as I scanned the tree line. Shadows shifted, figures slipping behind trunks. "Deputy West," a voice called, my own voice, precise and clipped. I froze. It came again. "Deputy West, you shouldn't have come back." The words were calm, menacing. I snapped my head toward the SUV's driver's seat. There, in a puddle of dim light, lay the tarnished key. I recognized it instantly, the bent, unmarked key from the motel. I strode toward it but slowed, noticing the passenger door opening of its own accord, squeaking on rusted hinges. A tall figure stood half inside, my double, hood down, eyes empty, pale as bone. I swallowed hard. The double's lips curved into a faint, mocking smile. He lifted the key and dangled it between long, spidery fingers. Behind him, the clearing churned, and dozens more shapes emerged. Officers in dripping uniforms, faces blurred, indistinct. But every hat bore my badge number. They stood in a semicircle, silent. The double turned, glancing at them, then back at me. "You took it all away," he said in my voice. "Now it's time to give it back." I reached out, compelled, and he slipped the key toward me. My fingers closed around it, cold steel, teeth sharp. The moment I touched it, the figures behind him began to move in perfect unison, stepping forward, echoing my own gait. Their boots slid through the mud without a sound. The forest around us throbbed, as if breathing. I yanked my hand back. The key disappeared, clattering against the SUV's roof, then vanishing into the fog. The figures halted. For a heartbeat, there was only static humming in my ears, then a whisper, "Run!" I didn't hesitate. I sprinted from the clearing, stumbling over roots and rocks, branches lashing my face. My lungs burned. Every breath was a stab of ice. Behind me, I heard them chase. Footsteps in perfect rhythm, closing in. Then the SUV's engine roared, though it sat ominously quiet in the clearing, lights flickering. It revved once, then died. I tore through the fog, guided by instinct more than sight. I didn't stop until I crashed back onto County Route 128, the pavement slick beneath my knees. My hands pressed into the white lines and I looked up. No patrol car, no motel lights, only fog drifting on the black ribbon of road. I was alone. My radio spit static, then silence. My breath formed quick clouds in the chill air. My pulse pounded so loud I could hardly think. I stood, shaking, and scanned the horizon. In the distance, a pair of headlights flickered, moving fast. They approached and slammed on brakes 100 yards away. 2 cruisers, lights blazing. Doors flew open and boots pounded. I waved frantically and ran toward them. When I got close, I realized the officers standing by the vehicles wore hats that said U.S. Forest Service, not Sheriff's Patrol. Their uniforms were green and brown. Their badges were bark shapes, not metal. They held clipboards and flashlights, faces drawn with concern. Yet their eyes were hollow, like mine had been. One stepped forward. "Ma'am, are you lost?" she asked in a patient tone. "You're a long way from the ranger station." She gestured behind me down the road that now seemed impossibly straight and empty, the fog receding like a curtain. I opened my mouth to speak but found no words. I backed away, heart hammering. A man beside her lifted what looked like a laminated license. "April West? Last seen alive approximately 30 minutes ago, near mile marker 42? His voice was oddly jolly, casual, as if reciting from a bulletin. My name was wrong, but his tone was certain. "April West," he repeated, as if testing the name on his tongue. I shook my head, tears streaming. "I'm Laura West," I managed to choke out. "Deputy, Mendocino County, Sheriff's Office." My uniform and my badge had vanished with the car. My jacket bore no insignia. My pockets were empty. The radio in my hand was a cheap walkie-talkie, not my department-issued device. The forest rangers exchanged glances. The woman ranger's lips curved into a sympathetic smile. "It's okay," she said. "Let's get you back to the station. We'll contact your department." I took a step, then realized the road behind me ended abruptly at a sheer drop, a cliff into blackness. The headlights illuminated nothing but swirling mist below. I peered over the edge and felt my stomach flip. Whatever boundary I'd crossed, I hadn't returned the same way. In the rearview mirrors of the cruisers, the forest looked like any other. Tall trunks, underbrush, nothing sinister. Yet I knew how wrong that was. I climbed into the ranger's cruiser, knees knocking. The doors closed, lights dimmed, and the engine started with a soft purr. We rolled away from the cliff's edge, leaving the fog to coil where it pleased. The woman ranger offered me a warm blanket, identical in pattern to the one that had haunted me. My breath caught. I clutched it, but it slipped through my fingers and floated to the floor. As we drove, I stared out the side window at the trees slipping by. Normal pines, normal trunks, a normal road. The radio crackled to life with a single, clear voice, my own. "Dispatch, are you copy?" I jerked upright. "This is West," I said, voice steadier than I felt. But the speaker cut off, replaced by the hum of static. Then the voice returned, calm and hollow. "I'm safe, I'm safe." I turned to the rangers. They watched me through the rearview mirror with gentle concern. The woman ranger said, "You're safe now." I closed my eyes and for one breathless moment believed her. Then I heard it. Soft laughter, just beyond the curve of the road. Children's laughter, men's laughter, my laughter, all layered into a single, ice-cold chorus. I leaned forward and pressed my face against the glass, staring into the dusk-lit woods. Branches swayed even though there was no wind, and deep in that rhythmic rustle I heard my own whisper, "Don't leave." What choice do we have when the forest itself calls our name? My hands shook on the steering wheel as the Ranger cruiser carried us away from the edge of that yawning chasm. Rain still pattered against the windshield, but the fog had lifted enough that I could see dim halos around the street lamps. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and closed my eyes, willing my racing heart to slow, to believe that what happened was somehow over. When I opened my eyes, the road had curved back into deep forest. The headlights carved twin tunnels of light ahead, each one ending in darkness. The woman ranger glanced at me through the rearview mirror and asked, "Do you remember what happened back there?" Her voice was calm, too calm, and I forced myself to meet her gaze. "Fragments," I said. "Flashes of something. Faces, voices." She nodded sympathetically. "You're safe now," she repeated. But her eyes were fixed on the trees outside, as though watching for something I could not see. The man beside her tapped the radio handset absent-mindedly, then set it down. "We'll get you back to the station," he said. "Get you checked out, get you home." I had no home to go to. When's the last time I'd actually gone home? The thought flitted through me. My apartment, dark and empty, my phone, silent, my badge and weapon, gone. I swallowed hard and turned my head to look at them. Their uniforms bore forest insignia, patches shaped like pine cones, badges that glinted like copper, rangers, not officers. But they called me by name and treated me with concern. "You're West," the woman said. "That's who you are." I thought of Deputy West, myself, out there, patrolling roads with a partner, solving petty crimes, answering calls like any other night. But that version of me had vanished into the mist, leaving only these disjointed memories. I forced my jaw to clamp shut and focused on the windshield. Mile marker 42 came into view, a solid white post by the roadside. I exhaled in relief, something consistent in all this chaos. We pulled into the ranger station parking lot, a low-slung log building with a peaked roof, windows dark. A single porch light cast a dull glow on wet wooden steps. The cruiser's blue lights reflected off slick cedar siding. The woman ranger turned off the engine and reached across to place a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, though my body felt like water. She opened her door and beckoned me out. "Come on," she said. "Let's get you inside." I unbuckled, stepping onto a deck slick with rain. The woman closed my door behind me. Then the man joined us. They stood in a silent triangle, faces polite but unreadable. I looked up at the porch light, flickering, and realized the station looked abandoned. No furniture visible. Through the windows, no muffled voices, no flicker of a television or radio. The ranger woman led me to the front door and unlocked it with a heavy ring of jingling keys. The lock turned with a hollow click. Inside, the station was cavernous and empty. Linoleum floors scuffed, rows of empty chairs, a reception desk with dust-flecked papers scattered across it. A faded map of the national forest hung crooked on the wall. Beneath it, an old sign reading, "Welcome to Redwood Crest Ranger District," swung on one hinge. "No one's here," I said, voice echoing. My fingers traced the edges of the desk. The paper on top was a single legal pad with my name scrawled at the top and a date. October 4th, 2021. Yesterday's date, but the handwriting wasn't mine. Below it, the note read, "Found 0030 a.m. near Route 128. Claimant, Deputy West." I looked up at the Rangers. Their faces were serene, but their eyes were distant, like they were reciting lines. "The report says you came in alone," the man said gently. "You were delivered by 2 Forest Service personnel. They said your patrol vehicle was at mile marker 42, engine idling." He stepped back and motioned to a corridor. "We'll need to get your statement," he said, "and run some checks." I nodded numbly and followed them down the hallway. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A single door on the right bore a stencil. "Interviews." The ranger woman opened it and stepped inside, gesturing for me to enter. I crossed the threshold and was struck by how ordinary it looked. A desk, 2 chairs, a cassette recorder, a stack of forms. I sat as she closed the door behind us. "You don't remember everything," she said, taking a seat opposite me. "That's normal after a traumatic event." I placed my hands flat on the desk, looking at my reflection in the polished surface. A pale face, dark circles under my eyes. "There was a body," I said in a whisper, "and my duplicate." My voice broke, and I shook my head. I saw myself. She nodded slowly, picking up a clipboard. "We'll note that," she said. "Sometimes adrenaline can cause hallucinations. You're exhausted." I tried to swallow, throat dry. "But she was there," I insisted. "And him." I tapped my temple. They called my name. She leaned forward and scribbled something. "We'll include that in the narrative," she said, rising. "Now, we need to run some medical tests. There's a clinic across the hall." She opened the door. "You can wait there. I'll send someone to escort you." I stood, legs unsteady, and followed her into a narrow hallway lined with empty lockers. The clinic room at the end was brightly lit, too bright. A nurse in green scrubs stood by a clipboard and smiled. "Deputy West," she said kindly. "We just need some vitals and a quick checkup. Have a seat." I sat on a vinyl examination table under a harsh light. The nurse took my pulse, my blood pressure, asked standard questions. But when I answered yes to my own name and job, she frowned and whispered something into her radio. "Her data isn't in the system." She glanced at me with concern. "It's okay," she said aloud. "Just relax." She wrapped a cuff around my arm, then paused. "Wait," she said softly. "I'm not finding your ID in the personnel records." I stared at her. "I lost it. It's gone," I whispered. "My badge, my paperwork." She shook her head. "I'm not seeing you anywhere." Heat rose in my cheeks. "I have to belong somewhere," I said, feeling tears sting. "I'm a deputy. You found me out on the road." The nurse's expression softened. "We'll figure it out," she said gently. "Maybe it's under a different name." She tapped at her tablet. "Can you confirm your date of birth?" I closed my eyes and tried to recall, but my mind felt like static, flashing images of a forest, a woman's face, a key, a duplicate of myself. When I opened my eyes, the nurse was gone. The lights flickered and the room plunged into dimness before stabilizing. I sat alone, heart thundering. I bolted off the table and rushed to the door. The hallway was empty. The chairs in the reception area deserted, the interview room dark. I ran down the corridor, retracing my steps, searching for the Rangers, anyone. Doors were closed, signs dusty. The overhead speaker crackled, then came to life with my own voice. "Are you safe? Are you safe?" It repeated twice before cutting off. Panic coiled in my gut. I fled the station lobby, bursting through the front door, into pouring rain. I stood under the porch roof, gasping, rain soaking my hair and jacket. The Rangers' cruisers were gone, leaving only my own patrol car behind. Its headlights were off. No door was ajar, no sign of life. I stared down the road. The forest loomed beyond, silent and patient. Through the mist, I thought I saw movement. Branches parting, a figure stepping forward. I couldn't see a face, only the silhouette of someone wrapped in that floral blanket. I knew it wasn't a mirage. I stepped off the porch, boots sinking into mud, and walked toward my patrol car. The storm had carved rivulets in the dirt, water gurgling at my feet. The SUV was parked nearby, engine cooling with its dome light on. Without thinking, I pressed my palm to the hood. Cold, solid metal. The radio in my pocket crackled. One final message. "We're here." The speaker crackled, growing louder, until it resolved into the voices of dozens of deputies and rangers, all calling my name in unison. I dropped to my knees, hands pressed over my ears. The laughter began, soft, then rising into a chorus of my own voice echoing off the trees. I looked up, sensing them on every side. Duplicates of myself, the woman in the blanket, hooded figures half hidden behind trunks. They stepped closer, slow and synchronized, until they crowded around me in a ring. I closed my eyes against the rain and the voices. When I opened them again, the forest was empty. The storm had passed. The road glistened under moonlight. The patrol car, the SUV, the ranger station, they were all gone, vanished as though they'd never existed. I stood alone on County Route 128, drenched and trembling, with nothing but the sky above and the trees pressing in. In my hand, I clutched a single key. The motel key, the forest key, the key to some place beyond reality. My radio lay silent in my pocket. I tucked the key into my coat and started walking, away from where I'd come from and toward somewhere. Behind me, the forest whispered my name, and I realized, with a cold certainty, there is no leaving once the forest claims you. I clipped the headset mic to my uniform collar and flicked on the cab light, half expecting the switch to glow red with warning. The analog clock on the dash read 2:47 a.m. Outside, the world was nothing but silhouettes, black pines marching into the fog, a ribbon of road that vanished into shadows, and the distant promise of nothing but emptiness. I cleared my throat, pressed the PTT button, and spoke into the dead air as though I was on air for the first time tonight. I'm Reyes, Mendocino Unit 47, beginning forestry patrol on County Route 11, Grid 39, ETA on station in 45 minutes over. A breath of static answered me. Good. Everything still worked. I shifted the rig into gear and slid forward on the narrow asphalt, headlights cutting twin slashes through the mist. My spotlight swept over roadside ferns, thick moss clinging to every trunk, and the occasional cluster of mushrooms glowing faintly under the beams. The only soundtrack was the staccato hiss of the tires and the low thrum of the engine. 10 minutes later, I rounded a bend and saw it. A half-ton pickup parked at a crooked angle on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking. No license plate visible in the half-dark. The truck was warm, engine off but radiating, yet no movement inside. A shiver tickled my spine. I killed the engine, grabbed my mag light, and stepped out into the chill. My boots sank into soft gravel, and the scent of pine sap and wet earth clung to the air. I clicked open the driver's door. Cold air rushed in. No footprints on the ground, no open glove compartment, no coffee mug left half-sipped. Just an empty cab and the low glow of the dashboard. I swept the beam across the seat. Nothing. Dispatch, I've got a 1058 on a solo vehicle. No plates. Doors unlocked but clear inside. No sign of driver, I said, voice low through the radio. Static crackled, then nothing. Beyond the beam, the trees stood motionless, as if waiting for me to make the next move. I eased around the front bumper to check the license plate mount, empty. But you could still see the faint smear of dirt where a plate had been. Whoever was here hadn't planned on staying. I hesitated. Logic told me to call for backup, run the VIN, do it by the book. But instinct prodded me. Something wasn't right. Taking a deep breath, I slipped off my jacket, clipped the taser case to my belt, and slipped my hand onto the grip. My beam caught movement at the edge of the woods. A flicker, like a shape shifting behind the trunks. I spun, heart clanging, and caught the faint outline of a man crouched against a tree, face turned away. "Hey," I called, voice firm. "State Patrol, come out with your hands up." Silence. Then a stifled croak. "Help! Me!" The voice was thin, near-whispered, and sounded too high-pitched to be the driver of a heavy pickup. My pulse sped. I stepped deeper into the brush. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the fallen needles made my skin crawl. "Talk to me," I said, extending my free hand. "Where are you hurt?" The figure bolted, more a lurch than a run, into the deeper gloom. I chased after him, boots thudding. Branches lashed my face, but I didn't slow. He ducked behind a massive cedar, and when I rounded the trunk, I stopped short. Nobody there. Just a trail of wet footprints leading farther into darkness. I wiped blood from my brow, scratched from a bramble, and clicked the mic. Requesting immediate backup, 1079 on foot with possible injured. Sector grid 39er, I'm following. Tracks westbound, over. No response. The radio had gone silent. I swore under my breath, eyes flicking between the path and the sky so thick with fog I couldn't even see stars. My breath came in slow puffs, my heartbeat the only real drum in the night. I pressed on. The forest swallowed sound. My voice, the crunching leaves, even the distant cry that had drawn me here. It felt like stepping into another world, where physics and reason bent. Every step felt heavier. Clark Ridge Road vanished behind me, replaced by a narrow deer path lined with brambles. 20 minutes in, I stepped into a clearing. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, painting the ground in silver patches. In the center lay a twisted bicycle frame, spokes bent, seat torn. Rusty bloodstains marred the metal. I knelt, shining my light over the wheel. No rider, no helmet. Just a cold artifact that screamed something terrible had happened. A sudden, rasping breath behind me made me spin around, gun drawn. Flashlight beam cut through the night, but the shadow slid away, a dark smear vanishing into the deeper gloom. I swallowed, voice steady. "Police! Show yourself!" Silence. Then, from the left, the whisper, "Please." It wasn't coming through my radio now. It sounded right beside my ear, a thin voice of panic. I edged closer to the bike, scanning for clues. A tattered piece of red cloth snagged in a bush. A single child's sneaker half hidden in ferns. My stomach clenched. Whoever this was, they were too scared to move. I holstered the gun, knelt, and picked up the sneaker. It was a tiny girl's shoe, scuffed on the sole. I pressed my palm over it, closed my eyes. "Hang on," I said softly. "I've got you." Then the ground trembled under my boot. An instant, seismic. A tremor that wasn't earthquake, but something moving beneath the earth. I stumbled back, dropping the shoe. My light swung upward and caught something I'll never forget. A pale hand, fingers splayed against the trunk of an old Douglas fir, nails caked with dirt, veins dark beneath mottled skin. The rest of the body was hidden in shadow, but I saw the sleeve, a small, faded blue jacket. I didn't hesitate. I rushed forward, hand on my taser, expecting to see a kid pinned against the tree or worse. but when I lunged around the trunk there was nothing. The handprint was gone. No blood, no indentations, as if it had never been there. My radio squawked with static. The emergency dispatch tone. Unit 47, respond to code red. Fire reported at mile marker 12. Repeat, fire reported at mile marker 12. Adrenaline hooked into my veins. The clearing blurred as I stumbled toward the bike again, snagged on brambles. The female voice echoed, distant but clear. Help me, find me. I fought through the brush, tore at branches, until I burst back onto Clark Ridge Road. Flames licked the tree line ahead, a smoldering bonfire, logs stacked as if in ceremony, glowing orange through the mist. Black smoke curled upward, and somewhere in that fiery haze I heard hysterical laughter. I stepped forward, light trembling, and saw someone kneeling at the edge of the fire pit, back to me, arms raised as embers swirled. Their form was slender, too small for an adult, but too large for a child. Something about the posture, the way the head tilted, made my blood run cold. Before I could call out, the figure whipped around. No eyes, just empty sockets, dark hollows that burned with reflected flame. The smile carved into that face was all wrong, too wide, too jagged, as if gouged by a cruel hand. I staggered back, heart hammering, radio forgotten. The thing lifted one arm and pointed at me with spidery fingers. Its voice, crackling like the fire, hissed, "Stay, forever." I raised my flashlight, hands shaking uncontrollably, and the beam flickered across its face. The hollow sockets seemed to leak shadows instead of tears. I fired my taser once, twice. The prongs arced uselessly through mist, and the creature dissolved into smoke, drifting upward like a nasty joke. I dropped to my knees, gagging on smoke and adrenaline. My uniform was scorched at the shoulders, but the fire had collapsed. Only glowing embers remained. The forest was dark again, silent. The bike lay overturned, the blue sneaker crushed by an unseen weight. I scrambled to my feet and stamped the embers with my boot. Then I clicked on the mic, voice raw. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47, cancel code red. I have a situation. Send medics and backup to Clark Ridge Road, mile marker 11. Over." Silence. Just static. I holstered my mic, forced my legs to move, and limped toward my cruiser. Every nerve screamed at me to get out. I hit the unlock on my fob and dove into the cab, slamming the door. The heated seats blistered my thighs. I fumbled the ignition, ripped the headset from my collar, and tore onto the road, leaving the flames and whatever had lived in them behind. The engine roared. My breath came in ragged bursts. In the rearview mirror I saw headlights appear in the mist. One set at first, then another closing in fast. Backup, thank God. But as I braked, the radio chirped to life one last time, an echo of that child's voice, distorted by static. "They're never gone." I floored it. The road rushed beneath me, and in the mirror, I realized the headlights following me were too bright, too close, and moving against the grain of the road. Something was behind me still, and it had nowhere to be but right there. A branch smacked the windshield. My heart leapt. I pressed harder on the accelerator, but the road curved, and the rig fishtailed. The last thing I remember before sight went black was the whisper through the speakers. "Help me, help me." And then nothing but the red haze of emergency lights. I woke to the chipped green tile of a hospital ceiling, each panel stained by age and patchwork repairs, and the metallic taste of blood still clinging to my tongue. My uniform was gone, replaced by a thin gown that rustled whenever I moved. Pain throbbed behind my eyes in time with my heartbeat, and every nerve felt raw, as if exposed to the cold air of that forest again. I blinked twice before I could focus on the shapes around me. Machines silently charting my vitals, a box of tissues on the bedside table, the blurry profile of someone in scrubs checking my IV. "Officer Reyes?" a voice asked, soft, professional. Not the crackle of dispatch static, my head lolled to the side. A doctor tilted my chart. "You've been out for 4 hours. You're stable now, but you took a tumble in the rig. We gave you a CT, minor concussion. Your partner reports you were found unconscious in your car." My mouth felt thick. I tried to speak, but all that came out was a rasped gasp. The doctor's forehead creased. "Easy, you're safe now. I'm Doctor Patel." I closed my eyes, reliving the finale, the screaming radio, the fishtail on the road, the whisper at the windshield. "Back up," I croaked. The memories surged, flames dancing through mist, that hollow face, the crackle of the obscene laughter. I bolted upright, sweat slicking my brow. A nurse's hand flew to my shoulder. "Lie back, please," she said firmly. My heart pounded like hail on a tin roof. The girl." I pointed at the ceiling, but my vision rattled. "Sneaker, the fire." Dr. Patel exchanged a look with the nurse. "You're experiencing post-concussion hallucinations. None of that happened." I swallowed. "You don't understand. I saw..." His tone softened. "You crashed. Your cruiser rolled into a shallow bank and flipped. You were lucky to survive. Whatever you thought you heard or saw was part of the head injury." I sank back, mouth dry. Easy for him to say. My blood still sang with adrenaline. My bones still treasured that terror. I stared at my hands. The tremor wouldn't stop. Later, the nurse left and Doctor Patel ducked out, promising to come back when I'm more coherent. Alone, I stared at the IV line. The forest was gone, replaced by institutional lights and the distant hum of machinery. A wave of nausea hit me. It wasn't just the concussion. Something deeper churned. Guilt. Fear. The nagging suspicion that calling it hallucination was a way to bury the truth. Time passed in fevered limbo. I drifted in and out of consciousness, chasing shadows in the corners of my mind. When the door clicked open, it wasn't Dr. Patel but Sergeant Willis, heavy-set, eyes grave. He carried my uniform jacket, still flecked with cinders. "Dana," he said quietly, closing the door behind him. "You okay?" I propped up on an elbow. "I'm fine. Why are you here?" He laid the jacket on the bed and sat. "We found the cruiser. It's totaled. Front end caved in. No fire, no camp, no prints or burn marks." He paused. "The forensics team dusted for prints. Nothing. Your radio's full of static. No recorded call for backup, no 1079 on foot. That part checks out. Nobody called you." My stomach lurched. I swallowed. "But I reported a fire. I saw..." He held up a hand. "We're not here to argue reality. We want you back on the road, but we need a report. Paperwork, Lieutenant wants an incident report by morning. You should rest." He helped me into the gown, adjusting the IV. His concern was genuine but distant, as if he were dealing with a ghost. I nodded, voice hoarse. I'll write it." He left, and the room settled in silence. I stared at the jacket on the bed, as if it belonged to someone else. I pulled the gown aside, searching my shoulder for burns. It was unscathed. My right hand found a bruise near the wrist, but no charred flesh. I traced the edges with a fingertip and wondered if I'd imagined the fire, the kneeling figure, the hollow face. Night crept back in through the narrow window. I listened. The distant hum of monitors, the muffled footsteps in the hall. My phone lay on the bedside table. I reached for it, hands shaking, and tapped the police app. Screens flickered as my memory sharpened. The hazard lights of the truck, the abandoned bike, that tiny sneaker. My thumb hovered over the photos in the evidence folder. They were gone. The entire case file was blank. Panic yanked at me. I scrolled through text messages. Nothing. No call logs, no dispatch audio. It was as if none of it had ever happened. I slid off the bed quietly, ignoring the soft groan of my bones, and crossed to the window. The parking lot lights stared back, indifferent. "Help me," I whispered, voice cracking. I wanted to believe it was a dream, but I could still feel the heat on my cheek, taste the smoke on my lips. Pressed my palm to the glass, breathing hard. The world outside was still, but in my gut I heard the echo. Help me. Find me. Weariness slammed into me. I knew I'd have to face it all again soon. Statements, paperwork, the flat denial of colleagues. My uniform awaited, rigid and accusing. I slipped back into bed and reached for the call button, wanting the nurse, wanting Dr. Patel, wanting someone to validate the nightmare. Instead, a soft chime announced another visitor. I tensed. The door opened to reveal Officer Martinez, a rookie from shift change, holding a cardboard box. "Hey," she said, offering a tentative smile. "Sergeant said you might want to see this." She set the box on my bed and stepped back. Inside lay evidence bags, the blue sneaker, the rusted bike chain links, a handful of ashen pine needles. My breath caught. Each item was tagged, sealed, photographed by forensics. The kicker, the location was listed as Clark Ridge Road, mile marker 11. Everything matched my story. I looked up. Martinez's eyes were wide. "We pulled these from the roadside fire pit. Nobody burned anything there. No kid went missing, but we found bones in the bonfire ash, human remains. We don't know whose, but it's real. You weren't hallucinating." I closed the box with a trembling hand. The world tilted. My head pounded again, but this time it was driven by hope and dread. Proof that something terrible had happened. But what? And to whom? Martinez lingered. "You okay?" I inhaled, fighting the quake in my voice. Number, "I'm not okay, but thank you." She gave a small nod and left, closing the door softly. My chest tightened as I sat on the edge of the bed, the box of evidence heavy in my lap. Fear pooled in my gut, but beneath it was something colder, responsibility. I had to find the victim, had to chase that whisperer through the dark again. I set the box down, grabbed the notepad the nurse left earlier, and began to write. Time, location, all I remembered. My hand moved fast, the words flowing in a jittery scrawl. Every detail mattered, the angle of the truck, the pattern of the footprints, the color of the jacket sleeve, the pitch of the voice. Halfway through, a memory hit me like a sledgehammer. The pale face pressed to the window as I fled. Those empty eyes. I shut my notebook with a snarl. I'd seen that face before, glimpsed it at the edge of my headlamp. It had looked back at me, pleading. Now, lying on this bed, I realized I had a choice. Let it stay buried in cold ash and static, or follow the trail deeper into madness. My head spun, but I forced myself upright. I stood, swaying, and reached for the phone. Dialing dispatch, I cleared my throat. Dispatch, Reyes. I'm changing my status. I need access to all Clark Ridge case files, missing persons, burn sites in this sector. Stat, and open a missing persons bulletin for a child, age unknown. Possible abductee. Someone's out there and I intend to find them. Silence. Then the click of acknowledgement. I hung up, chest tight, vision blurring with tears I wouldn't let fall. I slid on my shoes, the gown falling away, and stood in the harsh fluorescent light. My silhouette cast a long shadow across the floor. Outside the window, the parking lot was empty. The forest lay waiting beyond, silent and hungry. I grabbed the box of evidence, slung my uniform jacket from the chair, and headed for the door, knowing that what awaited on those foggy roads might break me forever. But I couldn't stop, because somewhere out there, a voice was still saying, "Help me, find me." I kill the engine at mile marker 11. Dawn's first light bleeds through the pines, a sickly pale that does nothing to chase away the shadows. My boots hit the damp gravel, and I haul the cardboard evidence box, sneaker, bike chain, needles, out of the back seat and down the road toward the old fire pit. The ash is cold now, layered in gray dust, but the embers I stamped out were real enough. Forensics have staked off a perimeter. Orange tape flutters between saplings. 2 techs in Tyvek suits lift small packets of soil, chip away at the ground. I duck under the tape, clipboard in hand, ready to file my own narrative once and for all. "Officer Reyes," calls Agent Crow, the county detective assigned to the scene. He gestures me over, face drawn with long nights and too much coffee. "We've mapped the burn radius. Nothing above ground level except what's already bagged." He nods at the box strapped under my arm. "Good catch on the sneaker. We got your print on it." My throat tightens. "Prints on the..." He shrugs. "Your glove made contact when you picked it up. But your print is the only one. No juvenile prints, no second set, just yours." I swallow. "And the bones?" Crow glances downward. "Still with the coroner. Preliminary, child-sized, could be years old, no ID. I need you to stay available for questions." My jaw clenches. "Questions fine, but I need answers. I need to find her." He looks at me, pity in his eyes. "We all want that, Dana, but it's a cold case at best. Odds are we're dusting off an old tragedy." I breathe low. Old or new, someone's missing, someone's still out there. He nods once, empathetic but unconvinced. I turn back to the pit. The burned logs are black spires, protruding like charred church pews. The wind's soft sigh rattles the pines. In that whisper, I swear I hear the girl's voice. Faint, pleading. I step off the road and into the circle of trees. My mag light scans the debris. Shards of plastic, maybe a doll's broken arm. Twigs snapped at knee height. Shallow depressions like footprints half faded. I crouch and press the beam into the earth. The ground is too disturbed to read easily, but there, an indentation shaped like a child's shoe sole. My pulse jumps. I trace it with a gloved finger. It leads north into thicker trees. I glance at the road. No tape, no crowds, no glare of headlights. I nod to Crow behind me, then vanish into shadow. The forest swallows sound again. Branches overhead knit a roof so dense the sunlight sputters. I follow the imprint, leaving the box behind. My hand rests on my holster, heart hammering. Every instinct screams to turn back, to get back up, but I can't. I promised her I'd find her. The trail grows clearer. Tiny footprints in moss, a smear of blood on a fern frond, the faintest scrape where bark was torn. I swallow bile and push onward, boots thudding. The voice echoes somewhere ahead, softer, almost joyful. "Help me." I round a massive cedar and freeze. In the clearing before me stands a small figure, a girl of no more than 6, dressed in the same faded blue jacket I saw at the roadside. Her face is hidden by matted hair. She's barefoot, feet muddy, and clutches something crumpled against her chest. The patch of sunlight that filters through the canopy rests on her head like a spotlight. I approach slowly, weapon drawn but lowered. "You okay?" "Hey, come here, sweetheart." My voice quavers despite myself. She looks up. Her eyes reflect the beam like dark glass. No whites, just obsidian orbs that swallow the light. She tilts her head, the stitched grin across her face widening unnaturally. In her arms is the torn torso of a police radio handset, my headset mic. I step back, my mouth runs dry. "Where did you get that?" She cocks her head to one side, rocking on blood-smeared toes. Then she whispers in perfect clarity, my own voice echoing, "Help me, find me." My finger twitches on the trigger. "Who are you? Where are your parents?" She laughs, a sound like broken glass. It shatters the forest stillness. Branches shake. The smell of smoke curls up again. I risk another step. The ground beneath her is charred. A circle of burned grass rings her tiny feet. My stomach clenches. The ashes shift, revealing charred bones. Too many to be her. I kneel, stomach twisting, and see teeth and fragments of skull among the embers. She tilts back her head and sings, "Forever, I'm here." The world tilts. My lights swing across the clearing. The trees seem to lean inward, trunks bending toward me like silent onlookers. The wind carries her laughter in ragged bursts. My throat tightens. My vision tunnels. I aim my weapon at her chest. "Don't make me!" She raises a pale hand and points at me. The forest dims behind her. She flickers, half there, half gone, like a faded film reel skipping frames. Her mouth opens impossibly wide, revealing jagged, uncanny teeth. The jacket sleeve falls back. It's empty. The body is gone. A scream rips out of me, but it's swallowed by the trees. I fire once. The bullet pings off a tree trunk, spraying bark. She's still there, eyes gleaming with malice. She steps forward, and darkness floods the clearing. My radio crackles. Reyes, you there?" It's Crow's voice, shaky. "We're sending a unit in. What's your ETA?" I don't answer. My hands go numb. I watch the spot where she stood. Nothing but shifting shadows. No footprints, no blood, no sign that she ever existed, except that gash of charred earth. I lower the gun and stagger back toward the road, breathing hard. Branches whip my face. My boots leave streaks in the moss. The tape at the edge of the clearing flutters in the wind. Crow's headlights pierce through the gloom. I cross into the beams and hold up my hands. He jumps out, radio in hand, eyes darting. "Dana, where? Are you hurt?" I stare past him at the darkness. She was here. My voice is hollow. Crow approaches slowly. "Who was?" I can't speak. I turn, yanking on his sleeve, and force him to look back into the trees. But they're still. The forest is a sea of gray-green trunks, silent and empty. He frowns. "Officer?" I point. "There?" He scans, sees nothing. "Dana, there's nobody." Then the tape snaps at the edge of the trees. A single shiver of orange flame blossoms among the branches, as if a match were lit in the depths. Crow sees it too and grabs me. "Stay back!" I wrench free and run toward the fire. Behind me, he yells. The undergrowth catches, hissing. The blaze surges, wind-fed, painting the pines in hellish light. I burst through the saplings and see her again, smiling, arms outstretched as the flames dance around her. The fire builds, roaring, and her face twists into a rictus grin. I raise my gun, voice cracking. "I'm here! I'm here!" She turns, mouth open in an impossible scream that melts into the roar of the fire. I fire again and again, each shot punctuating the heat. The forest answers with cracking wood and shrieking embers. Then everything goes white. I wake in my cruiser, engine running, sirens echoing down the road. My jacket is singed at the collar. My gloves are scorched and sticky. I'm shaking so hard I can't grip the wheel. The radio is silent, the tape long gone from the trees. Behind me, Crow's unit pulls past, floodlights scattering the mist. He gives me a look that asks questions I can't answer. I switch off the ignition and step out into the growing light. Forest on one side, asphalt on the other. The air smells of char and sap and something else. Something familiar, something hers. I bend and pick up a single charred beetle wing, delicate and blackened. I close my fist around it. The forest is quiet now, but in my mind I hear her whisper, clear as a bell, "Help me." And I realize that no matter how far I run, or how many cases I close, I'll never stop hearing her voice. Because this road doesn't end. The trees don't forget. And the question that keeps me awake, even after the fire's buried and the ashes swept away, is simple. Who's really lost out there, waiting for rescue? And who's the one doing the rescuing? The headlights carved twin ribbons of gold through the mist as I eased the cruiser onto Clark Ridge Road. My hands still trembled, fingers brushing the steering wheel's leather grip. Sirens faded behind me. I'd insisted the units pull back so I could finish what I'd started, alone. The embers of dawn were chasing the black sky, but the forest remained a cathedral of shadows. My uniform hung limp against my skin, sweat and ash baking through the fabric. Every muscle ached from running, from firing rounds into nothing, from sprinting through underbrush where each snapped twig felt like a scream in my ears. I shut off the engine and sat in the steamy hush, letting the rising sun warm the glass. Then I stepped out. The air was cold, biting at the edge of my exhaustion. I crossed to the fire pit again. It was nothing but a ring of cracked stones now, dull gray against the damp forest floor. No flames, no footprints. The Tyvek tape had been removed, but the scent of char persisted, an invisible smoke hanging between the trees. I crouched, fingertips brushing the ring of stones, feeling the rough edges, the heat memory still clinging. I closed my eyes and listened. No whispers, just the wind rattling needles far overhead. My pulse rattled in my ears. I opened my eyes and looked down at the coal-dusted soil. My glove was still tucked in my back pocket. I pulled it out and pressed it to the earth. The ground was firm, unyielding. Nothing moved. Frustration flared through me. I'd seen her, whatever she was, and I'd felt her sorrow, her anger, her plea. "Help me, find me." Her voice had been clear, desperate. It echoed in my mind like a broken record. I spat ash onto the ground and rose. The cruiser door opened behind me. Sergeant Willis strode out, coffee cup steaming in hand. He'd arrived while I'd stood staring at empty ash. "Dana, you all right?" he asked gently, though I knew he'd heard the report. My disappearance from the ER, my demands for evidence access, my insistence on coming back here solo. I nodded, tight-lipped. "I need to map the perimeter, walk the path, find anything we missed." He frowned. "Lieutenant's orders, you're off duty until tomorrow. You've had a concussion, Dana." I turned to him, fire in my eyes. "This isn't about me. It's about her. She's here." He set the coffee down on the hood and crossed his arms. "I've heard the story. I've seen the evidence box. The coroner confirmed child remains in the bonfire, years old. We'll assign a cold case detective tomorrow. Right now, I need you to rest." I swallowed past the dryness in my throat. "You think I'm crazy?" His expression softened. "We think you're exhausted, traumatized. Tomorrow, we'll do this together. Tonight..." He looked up at the canopy. "Tonight, let me drive you home." I hesitated. The smell of pine was sweet but heavy, the forest floor soft beneath my boots. I glanced back at the pit, still silent. "Okay," I said finally. "One more lap, then I'll go." He nodded and waited as I circled the clearing. I traced my steps from the cruiser, the snapped granite marker, the crushed fern where the bike fell, the smear of dark sap on the cedar trunk. Each landmark was a wound in the earth, And then I saw it. A single blue sneaker, half buried in moss 50 feet from the fire pit's edge. My heart pounded. This wasn't in the evidence logs. I hadn't bagged a second shoe. I knelt and blew gently. No layers of ash, no crust. The color was vivid, cerulean canvas dotted with silver flecks. The sole treads were pristine, as though new. A chill shot through me. The girl hadn't been alone. She'd come back. I reached out, fingertips hovering an inch above the toe when a voice crackled behind me. "Dana." "Willis?" He stood with the flashlight, eyes wide. "What is that?" I froze, then picked it up. It was cold and weightless. I turned it in my hands. No tag inside, no wear on the laces. I pried one eyelid open. Nothing. It was empty. Too empty. I heard her whisper again, low and urgent. "Help me." I looked up. The trees were still, but the forest floor beneath the sneaker faded into mist, as though the ground itself had exhaled. The air rippled. And then, as though scattered by a breeze, dozens of tiny sneakers, pink, red, yellow, gray, sprouted at the forest's edge, half buried in leaf litter. Shoes lined every root, every mossy stone, each one angled toward the clearing. Willis shone his light at me. "Reyes, what the hell?" I dropped the sneaker. It hit the ground with a hollow thud. The flashlight beam danced across the forest floor. The shoes shimmered in dew and shadow, a silent army awaiting command. A child's laughter rang out, soft and distant, mocking, sorrowful, impossibly close at once. The forest parted like curtains. There she stood again, jacket damp, hair plastered, eyes blacker than midnight. She smiled. Her mouth was torn, cheeks smeared with ash and tears. She raised a hand and pointed at me, but not angrily, more pleadingly, as though she was begging an answer. "Help me," she said, voice lilting, indrawn, and it echoed through the trees. I swallowed, voice caught. Willis grabbed my arm. "Dana, come on." But I couldn't move. I raised my flashlight. She flickered. The shoes at her feet danced, spinning in place. The ground swelled like a tide of shadows. The trees leaned closer, trunks rippling as though alive, watching. I fell to my knees, the world tilting. The girl knelt too and reached into the mist, pulling something toward her chest. It was the radio handset, my headset mic again, glowing faintly blue. She held it out to me. I crawled forward, every breath a promise, every heartbeat a plea. She extended the mic, nails stained black. "Speak," she whispered. My mouth opened, but all that came out was an echo. "Help me. Find me." Her grin broke wide, so wide it split her face. The forest erupted in a chorus of children's voices, crying, laughing, crying again. The shoes began to vanish one by one, melting into leaves. The ash stirred into the air, drifting upward like a funeral pyre. Willis's voice yelled in the distance, lost to the cacophony. The flashlight clattered to the ground. I pressed the mic to my lips. "Where are you? Who are you?" Her face flickered. The swirling mist took form around her, shaping into dozens of little bodies, arms outstretched. They wailed in unison, a requiem of longing, and lunged toward me, yet passed harmlessly through my body, cold like winter's breath. I clutched the mic until the plastic cracked, the static echo roaring louder than any scream. The forest floor yawned open in front of me, gaping branches like ribs. The children's voices coalesced into a single phrase. "Find us." I tried to stand, to run, to crawl away, but everything went white. When I woke, I was alone. The sun was high, warming the cabin of my cruiser. The box of evidence lay on the passenger seat, sealed, full. No sneakers, no ash, no shattered radio. My partner sat in the driver's seat, arms crossed, expression flat. "Lieutenant wants your report by EOD, and you've got a therapy appointment in 20. He pointed at my badge. "We'll chalk it up to stress and exposure. You're off the case." I shut the door and settled into the seat. My uniform felt heavy, foreign. The forest was still out there. Tangled pines, fog-kissed roads, silent witnesses to something monstrous. I stared at the badge on my chest, then at the rearview mirror. I half expected to see pale eyes pressed against the glass. Instead, I saw my own reflection. Hollow, haunted. The radio hissed. "Dispatch. Unit 47, status update?" I flipped the mic open. My voice was low, steady. "Unit 47 to dispatch. No further sightings. I'm securing the perimeter. Resume standard patrol." I clicked off. But as I backed the cruiser onto the highway, I heard it. So soft at first that I thought it was wind through the vents. "Help me." And I knew the answers were never coming. Because they were never meant for me. Who was I, really, to rescue the lost? And how long before I, too, became one of them? Just another voice on the static, begging in the dark. I pulled into my driveway just as the sun cleared the ridge, orange light spilling across my front yard. The cruiser's engine ticked as it cooled. My uniform was stiff with sweat and ash, the badge cold against my chest. I stared at the house. 2 stories of peeling white paint and overgrown hedges, knowing nothing inside would feel normal again. I killed the engine, let the silence settle, and climbed out. Gravel crunched under my boots as I walked to the porch, keys rattling in my hand. The air tasted like pine and gasoline. My gloves were still in my pocket. I left them there, along with the shattered pieces of my calm. Inside, everything was quiet. The kitchen was dark, the coffee pot drained. I flicked on a single lamp and sat at the table, hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee so bitter it burned my throat. My chest ached, and every nerve in my body felt exposed. I stared at the door, half expecting the hallway beyond to blur into mist, a tiny jacketed figure, stepping forward with hollow eyes. Hours later, I forced myself to go through the motions. Cold shower, clean clothes, a quick sandwich. My phone buzzed with missed calls. Dispatch, Internal Affairs, Willis. I left them all unread. My rifle was in the trunk. The taser was tucked into its case by the driveway. I couldn't sleep tonight, not after what I'd seen. I sat on the edge of the couch in my living room, beige carpet, thrift store couch, half-empty liquor cabinet, and put on the local news. A story about a house fire in Bend, an overturned logging truck on Highway 20, a missing teenager found safe. None of it hit me. I kept waiting for a headline about Clark Ridge Road, about the burned bones, about a little girl lost in the woods. There was nothing. At midnight, I finally stood and walked to the window overlooking the street. The world was still. Dark houses, silent yards, the occasional cat slinking across the lawn. I rubbed my eyes. In the corner of the window pane, I thought I saw a pale face, droplets of mist clinging to a cheek, lips parting in a silent plea. I blinked. The reflection was mine, haggard, haunted. Behind me, the front door clicked. I spun, hand dropping to my holster, heart leaping. But it was just Willis carrying 2 mugs of coffee and a worried frown. He set one in front of me. "Thought you could use this," he said quietly. I nodded once, voice tight. "Thanks." He sat, eyes on me. "You did your job out there. Evidence shows someone was burnt in that pit. Bones, personal effects, match your description. You're cleared on the crash. IA's satisfied." I stared at the mug, didn't taste the coffee. "So they believe me?" He shrugged. "They believe something happened, but nobody can explain it. Not scientifically, not legally. You're off the case, but hey, you're alive. That's something. I looked up at him, feeling the weight of every unasked question between us. Will you tell me if they reopen it? He hesitated, then nodded. Sure. He stood and walked for the door. Before he left, he turned back. Dana, just get some rest. The house was still again. I drained the coffee, grimaced at the bitter dregs, then carried the mug to the sink. My reflection in the stainless steel door was grim. I let out a long breath and headed upstairs. In my bedroom, I switched on the lamp by the bed and unlocked my phone. There was one last message I hadn't opened, a voicemail from dispatch. I tapped it. A crackle of static, then my own voice. County, this is Reyes. If anyone's out there, The line went dead. No over, no background noise, just my own voice cutting off. I played it again. Same. I scrolled to the timestamp. 2:49 a.m. That was when I first heard the whisper come through my headset. A cold knot formed in my gut. I climbed into bed fully clothed, boots still on, and stared at the ceiling. The silence settled around me, dense as fog. My eyes burned. My phone vibrated with an incoming text. From unknown, help me. My heart froze. I sat up, thumb hovering over the screen. No number, no timestamp, just those two words, help me. I dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor. Silence. My breath rattled in my ears. I reached out, flipping the light off, plunging the room into darkness that felt thicker than any forest. The window rattled, soft, then insistent. I climbed out of bed, boots thudding on the hardwood floor, and moved toward it. The curtains were still. The night outside was black, but for the distant glow of the streetlight. Nothing. Then a whisper. So close I felt the breath on my cheek. Help me. I spun around. Empty room. My reflection in the mirror trembled. I leaned forward, pressing my palm to cold glass. And there, imprinted in the dust, were tiny footprints leading away. Footprints that vanished under the bed. I swallowed. The whisper came again, this time behind me. Find me. My hand went to my holster. I flicked on the flashlight app in my phone. Its beam danced across the dark room. The footprints appeared again on the carpet, leading to the door, and beyond, down the hall, toward my wife's room, toward the stairs, toward the front door. I exhaled, voice trembling. I'm coming. Because she wasn't done with me. And this time, I was the one who needed help. Shadows shifted in the doorway. The quiet demanded an answer. Can anyone hear me? I called into the darkness. Only the whisper answered in return. I'm here. My boots echoed against the hardwood as I crept down the dark hall, flashlight beam trembling ahead of me. The air smelled like stale coffee and pine sap overlaid with something fouler, an acrid tang I recognized from the bonfire pit. My heart pounded so hard I could almost hear it through the wood beneath my feet. Each step felt like wading through molasses. The footprints in the carpet ahead of me glowed faintly under the light, as though carved into the fibers by some maddening pressure. The path led past the framed photos on the wall, my wife and me at our baby daughter's first steps preserved on glossy cardstock, a family portrait from last Christmas. In every smiling face I saw the shadow of that little girl in the forest, the hollow eyes, the charred handprint, the woman I'd tried so desperately to save. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep moving. At the end of the hall, the footprints diverged, one set veering right toward my daughter's room, another set angling left toward the stairs. My mouth went dry. The whisper came again, closer now, as though breathed into my ear. Help me. I spun toward my daughter's door first. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beyond the film of yellow nightlight spilling out. I raised my voice hoarse. Honey, are you awake? No answer. just the soft hum of the heater vent. I crossed the threshold and shined the light into the room. Toys lay strewn across the floor, unicorn figurine tipped on its side, a blanket half draped over the crib. No tiny feet, no sleeping back turned to me, just shadows in every corner. A soft giggle slipped from the darkness. I jerked around, heart nearly exploding. My daughter's voice, but it wasn't her. This laugh was hollow, metallic, like wind rattling a loose shutter. The footprints in the carpet had led right through her room, disappearing at the foot of the bed. I flicked off the light, swallowed hard, and backed out. My flashlight cut left, down the stairs. The footprints reappeared on the top step leading into the living room. I paused at the bottom, the open front door visible through the window, curtains swaying as if someone had brushed past. A chill crawled up my spine. The whisper, so intimate now I could feel the breath in my ear. Find me. I followed the footprints across the living room, over the coffee table, past the couch, every piece of furniture an obstacle in my path. The box of evidence sat on the end table, sealed but now dusted with fine gray ash. I closed my eyes, picturing the girl in her blue jacket, the circle of burned earth, her outstretched hand. If I reached the door and she wasn't there, I didn't know what I'd do. I turned the knob and stepped onto the porch. The night air was cold, sharper than any winter chill I'd ever felt in Oregon. The trees beyond my yard were still as a tomb. The footprints continued out along the sidewalk, pressing into the sparse grass, then across the drive, leading straight toward the street. Streetlights flickered, and in the distance I thought I saw her silhouette, just the faintest shape in the mist. I raised my flashlight and my voice, though trembling with exhaustion. I'm here. Where are you? No response, only the echo of my own words drifting back. I took another step onto the road, boots crunching gravel. The street was empty, yet in the mist I could make out the outline of someone standing under the lamppost. Blue jacket, small frame. My chest clenched. I sprinted forward, heart slamming against ribs, adrenaline armoring my limbs against fatigue. When I reached the lamppost, it was empty. No little figure, no boots, nothing but damp asphalt. Yet, at the base of the lamp, the mist parted to reveal a single print. The tiny tread of a child's shoe, pressed into the softened concrete. Beneath it, sketched in the fog like someone's finger had written it, were two words: "Help me." I sank to my knees, flashlight clattering to the ground. My hands shook as I stared at the message. I reached out, fingertips hovering an inch above the letters, wanting to touch them, to know they were real. But the mist swirled and the letters dissolved, dripping down the sidewalk like rain. A car engine rumbled behind me. I looked up to see Sergeant Willis pulling over, spotlights slicing through the fog. He jumped out, calling, "Reyes! Where? What are you?" I scrambled backward, adrenaline threatening to turn to rage. "She was here! She's out there, Sergeant!" He shone his light on my face, wide-eyed, broken. "Dana, get in the car. Let's go inside." I shook my head, panting. "Number, I've come this far. I need to see this through." He took a cautious step forward. "It's fog, stress. You nearly died twice tonight." I turned back to the street, but the figure under the lamp had left no trace, no print, no hint of where she'd gone. Only the empty road stretched on under the yellow haze. My breath hitched. The whisper drifted from the mist, softer than ever, like a lullaby from far away. "Find me." I rose unsteadily to my feet, looking down the road that disappeared into black, where no streetlight shone. The pull was magnetic, torturous. Part of me begged to turn back to safety, to the warmth of the house, to the sanity of the station. But deeper still was the bond forged in that clearing among the trees, where I promised a lost girl I'd bring her home. I took a step forward, then another, until the headlights retreated behind me. Willis's hand on my shoulder was warm, grounding. He spoke softly, "You don't have to do this alone." I nodded, voice breaking. "I know, but I can't let her wander forever." I glanced down at the empty sidewalk. What if she's not out there? The hush answered me, settling around my words like snow. I swallowed hard, squared my shoulders, and lifted my flashlight high. The beam pierced the fog, illuminating nothing but swirling droplets. Yet in that beam I saw something flicker, an impression of little feet running ahead, always just beyond reach. My jaw set. Then I'll find her where she is. The final question echoed in my mind as I stepped into the mist. What do you do when the lost you're trying to save is no longer alive, and the only thing that keeps moving is the promise you made to a ghost? I flicked the overhead lights off as I rounded the bend onto Forest Route 12, my cruiser's low-beam headlights cutting through the pre-dawn mist. It was just past 2 a.m. on March 14th, 2025, and the world felt suspended in that sliver of time when nocturnal creatures stir and the usual hum of engines and distant sirens dies down to nothing. My name is Officer Sarah Lewis, badge number 06241, Oregon State Patrol, and I've driven this stretch more times than I can count. But tonight, the quiet pressed against me like a weight, and every breath of cold, pine-scented air reminded me that out here, the forest owns you. The radio crackled beneath my palm. "Lewis, you copy? Possible trespasser on private land, Route 12, milepost 7. Proceed with caution." Dispatch's voice was calm, but I knew that calm could vanish in an instant. I acknowledged with a clipped 10-4 and eased the cruiser forward, tires whispering against the cracked asphalt. My eyes scanned the roadside. No headlights, no broken fence, just thick stands of fir and cedar closing ranks on the narrow road. I slowed to 14 miles per hour, standard protocol for reports of someone on foot in this area, and tapped the siren's button twice, a low yelp that echoed once, then died. Half a mile later, headlights materialized around a curve. A 2008 Honda Accord parked at a jaunty angle on the shoulder. Driver's door wide open. No taillights on, no engine noise. The vehicle's paint was dull, a film of pollen and damp needles clinging to the hood. My stomach tightened. I clicked on my spotlight, its beam slicing the fog to reveal a single leather jacket draped across the passenger seat. Inside, the front console held an empty coffee cup and a GPS screen frozen on Route 12. The passenger window was cracked, an inch or so, a window left open against safety protocol. Whoever'd pulled over hadn't intended to stay long. I killed the spotlight and killed the engine, then slipped out of the cruiser with my flashlight in one hand and my service pistol in its holster. Habit, training, never let them see you afraid. My boots sank slightly in the soft shoulder gravel as I moved in a crouch. The Accord's license tag ended in 379. I keyed that into my portable computer but got nothing. No stolen report, nothing out of Mendocino or neighboring counties. Someone ditched it here. My heartbeat thudded in my ears as I hovered at the open door, peering inside. No purse, no backpack, only that jacket and a folded map of the nearby logging trails. Before I could radio for a tow, a faint sound tickled the silence. I froze. Scritch, scritch, like dry leaves dancing across bare earth. I swung the flashlight into the brush 10 feet away. Shadows shifted, and I caught the glint of an eye or a cell phone reflecting back. "Oregon SP, show yourself," I barked. The echo rattled off tree trunks. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then a whisper. "Help, please." The voice was low, ragged, impossibly close. I spun toward my radio. "Dispatch, I've got a voice calling for help off the road. Coordinates unknown, sounds female, terrified." My words felt hollow in the frozen air. "Copy that. Stay safe, Lewis," came the reply. I clicked off and scanned again. My flash beam caught on a dark shape slithering between trunks, someone stepping back onto the road. I dashed forward as fast as the mud permitted, my jacket snagging on a bramble. "Hold up, Oregon State Patrol." The figure paused in the headlight glow, face obscured by shadow, then vanished again into the trees. My pulse spiked. I radioed backup. "I'm moving in on foot. Keep the cruiser nearby. Unit 23 to Unit 24. Stand by." I plunged into the forest, branches tearing at my sleeve. My boots sank into moss. The air was thick with damp, the scent of pine resin and earth so strong it felt tangible. My flashlight flickered as I pushed through a thicket of saplings. Every snapped twig made me jump. I followed a faint line of footprints in the mud. One set lace-up sneakers, another heavy tread boots. They led deeper, away from the road, winding toward a hollow where the fog pooled like liquid. A sudden crash to my right sent my heart leaping. I spun, training my light on a fallen log 5 feet away. Nothing there. I swallowed hard, forced myself to keep moving. If someone was out here calling for help, they could be in real trouble. Or worse, could be the one in trouble. I rounded a curve of oaks to find a small clearing ringed by boulders and waist-high ferns. In the center lay a hastily built campfire. The wood still warm, but cold enough to rest my hand. Next to it, an overturned camping stove and a single hiking stick leaned against a stone. Closer inspection revealed a cell phone face down, screen cracked, with Grace displayed on the lock screen. The name from the dispatch file. Did she pull over trying to call 911? Why here? I flipped it over. No service bars. I dropped to one knee to check the phone's call log. Blank. I radioed in. "I've located a phone labeled Grace at the campsite. No call history. Stand by for possible person of interest." My breath billowed in front of me, the beam illuminating motes of mist. Before I could move again, I heard a soft, wet sound behind me, like someone stepping in mud. I spun, and the beam caught a flash of motion, a tall figure slipping behind a boulder. My finger hovered on the PTT button. "Come out with your hands up," I shouted. Silence wrapped around me. Then I heard it, breathing. Slow, shaking inhales that echoed through the clearing. I edged forward, heart pounding so loud I worried she'd hear it from 20 feet away. "Grace?" I called. No reply. The breathing stopped. My flashlight beam swept the perimeter. Ferns, rocks, more trees, and nothing. Discomfort curled in my stomach. In training, they told you the forest was full of eyes, animals watching you, but this felt like something else. Someone meant to be found. Someone wanted help, or someone wanted me to find something. I took a step back, noticing fresh footprints approaching from the far side of the clearing. 2 sets, 1 sneaker, 1 boot again. But these prints circled around me, as though someone had been stalking the campsite, waiting. My pulse hammered. I radioed, "Diaz, I need you here now." As I spoke, my light caught on metallic glint half buried in the dirt, handle of a utility knife. I flicked it free, no sheath, no owner in sight. I pocketed it, drawn pistol still aimed at the tree line. Then I saw her, a figure crouched behind a moss-covered log, eyes reflecting the flashlight glare. Her hair was caked with mud, clothes torn in places. She looked up at me, face pale and ashen, expression blank. "Please," she whispered, voice trembling. She didn't stand, just held her arms out that were shaking uncontrollably. The knife I'd picked up felt like the key to everything. Part of me wanted to drop the pistol, break protocol, and rush to her. Part of me wondered if this was a trap. My radio burst to life with Diaz's voice. "On scene, what do you got?" Relief and tension tore through me. "I've got a female, appears disoriented, crouched at the edge of the clearing. No visible weapons, but I found a knife. She claims she needs help. I'm going in for a closer look." Diaz responded with, "Copy that. Backup's en route." I clicked off and took a deliberate, measured step toward her, announcing every movement. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Lewis. Can you tell me what happened?" She blinked, swiped a hand across her mouth. They came out of the dark. I heard screaming. I ran here." Her voice cracked like old paint. "I tried to get back on the road, but I couldn't leave them." The mist thickened then, clutching at my shoulders as if to pull me in. The forest fell deathly still, no breeze, no rustle, just that low fog creeping around our boots. I crouched, resting my free hand on the thick grip of my pistol, forging that fragile connection of trust. Who came out of the dark? Who's screaming? She stared at the handle of the pistol more than at my face. "I don't know," she whispered. "Something, or someone." She shuddered, curling in tighter. The knife in my pocket felt suddenly heavier. In that moment, headlights flared at the road's edge, and I realized how alone I'd been. Alone in the forest with a stranger who might be innocent or might be a threat. As I raised my flashlight to signal Diaz, the woman's eyes lifted, narrowing. She pointed a trembling finger back toward the trees, voice a rasp, "Don't go in there." My blood turned cold. Behind her, beyond the ring of spotlight, the forest seemed to pulse, as though breathing, alive with hidden watchers. I swallowed hard, radio mic halfway to my lips. "Diaz, hold up. I need you to bring a medic now. This woman, she's unstable. And I just got a warning." My words trailed off as I focused on the darkness beyond, a darkness deeper than any night I'd ever known. Something twisted out there, just beyond sight, waiting. And for the first time, I realized that on a Friday night shift, peace is the illusion, and reality can turn on you in a heartbeat. The forest was silent, and I was shivering, not from the cold, but from the certainty that whatever prowled those trees was not about to let me, and my partner, leave this clearing unscathed. My radio crackled again, a lifeline slicing through the suffocating hush of the trees. "Lewis, Medic 23 en route," Diaz's voice sounded, taut. I gave a shaky thumbs up in the darkness. No point speaking into the mic and risking another dead air. The figure crouched before me didn't flinch when blue-red lights spun their patterns across her pale, mud-smeared face. She stayed huddled on the ground, knees drawn to her chest, arms wrapped tight. The knife I'd pocketed pressed cold against my thigh. Diaz arrived in the beam of the spotlight, jogging across the clearing with his flashlight in one hand and a medical kit in the other. "I got her," he said softly. He crouched and placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "I'm Officer Diaz. You're safe now." The woman's head lolled as if she might collapse entirely. I holstered my pistol and knelt on the opposite side, shining my light under her chin to study her tear-smudged features. Not dirt, dry blood crusted in patches where she'd apparently scratched her face raw. Her eyes darted between us, wide and frightened. "Grace?" I asked, voice low. She closed her eyes and shook her head. "Not Grace. She's gone." Her whisper was a rasp. Then she sobbed, and Diaz wrapped his jacket around her shoulders. I stepped back to clear space. The air felt thicker here, like fog trapped behind invisible walls. The forest had gone mute again. No birds, no wind, only our breaths and the snap of my own pulse in my ears. Medic 23 pulled up just then, headlights shining from the road where the cruiser waited. 2 EMTs hurried in, their flashlights bobbing as they approached. "Officer, we'll take it from here," one called, kneeling beside the woman and checking her pulse. I stood, jaw clenched, scanning the darkness beyond the clearing's edge. My light picked out the knife handle, silver and accusing, atop damp pine needles near the boulder. I pocketed it again, evidence until proven otherwise. Diaz returned, holstering his own sidearm. "She's hypothermic, dehydrated. Says she was lost for days, that she tried to help someone else first." He looked at me with a tilted head. "We should get her and the phone back to the light. Secure the scene and wait for forensics." I nodded, then tapped my radio. "Dispatch, Lewis. Injured subject in custody. Please send forensics and major crimes. Suspect unknown identity, but plate 379 registered to Grace Hollister. Family reported her missing last month. We have a second person of unknown status." I paused, glancing at the EMTs bundling the woman onto a stretcher. "Additional resources requested. K9 unit for track, Forest Service on standby." The EMTs wheeled her toward the cruiser, and Diaz caught my arm. "One thing," he murmured. "She said she wasn't alone. That someone or something else got to Grace first, pulled her into the woods." I swallowed. That same voice echoed in my head. "Don't go in there." I shook my head as if to clear it. "That's her breakdown talking," I said quietly. "We don't know what happened yet." He nodded reluctantly, but I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. We moved back to the Accord and crouched beside it. I shone the flashlight across the ground. No footprints other than the 2 sets we'd followed. No tire treads, no blood trail. I keyed my muzzle light onto the driver's seat again and pried open the map, running my finger along the logging trails. "There," I said. "If she tried to walk back or look for help, she might have aimed for the old logging camp near Ashwood Ridge. That loop's about 2 miles north." I pointed into the darkness. "I want a K9 track laid from here and a search grid set up along those trails." Diaz sent out the call. I leaned against the cruiser's hood, hugging my arms around myself. The warmth of the engine seeped through my uniform as assuagement. Yet the forest called to me like a living thing. I could almost feel its presence shifting behind every tree. The mist drifted low, backlit by emergency lights, creating phantoms that flickered in peripheral vision. "Dispatch, Lewis. Secondary subjects secured. Please confirm ETA for K9 and forestry." My voice unsteady, a beat, then K9 unit is 15 minutes out. Forestry team delayed by fallen trees on Elk Creek Road, ETA 40 minutes. My stomach sank. We couldn't wait a full 40 minutes if someone else was still out there. I turned to Diaz, who was jotting notes into his pad. "We start on foot," I said. "You and me. Grab the GPS beacon and the phone. We'll call it in as we go." He hesitated, but the urgency in my tone overcame caution. "Just us, Lewis?" he asked, voice low. I slid him the phone. "It's pinging faintly near the camp, and I want eyes on those trails before night fully gives in today. Let's move." We geared up, flashlights, radios, Kevlar vests, and slipped back across the clearing. As we approached the cluster of ferns where we'd found the phone, the ground was littered with pine needles stained brown. I crouched and picked up the device, its screen dark, then tapped the home button. It flickered alive, showing one notification. A voicemail from Grace, time-stamped 6 days ago, 2:07 a.m. My heart jolted. 6 days ago was the night the missing person report went out. Our missing Grace had tried to call help from here, then vanished. I pressed play, and the low buzz of voicemail gave way to Grace's panicked voice. "They took my phone. Help me, please. If you find this, don't trust the road. It's not just trees. It's in the trees." Then static. Guttural so human it raised the hair on my arms. Diaz watched my face. I let the message finish. Silence returned, heavier than before. That's, he whispered, closing his eyes. She knew. My jaw clenched. She knew something was out here. We're going in. I clipped the phone to my belt and clicked the GPS beacon on. Dispatch dropping GPS beacon. Beginning foot search northbound on logging trail loop toward Ashwood Ridge. Stay on Channel 5. I led the way into the thick brush, muscles trembling with adrenaline. The trail was barely visible. Roots and fallen branches obscured the path. I lifted the flashlight to eye level to cut through the fog. Every exhale became a cloud in the beam's glow. We moved in single file, me, then Diaz. I called out every 20 yards. Oregon State Patrol, checking for any sign of Grace or evidence. My voice felt small in the cavern of trees. After 10 minutes, the trail forked. The left branch curved toward a dense stand of dead firs, their needles gray and brittle. The right wound uphill toward Ashwood Ridge's ridge crest. I hesitated, gutted. Grace's voicemail said, "Don't trust the road." But did that mean the main logging trail or the dead tree stand? I clicked on my mic. "Diaz, left or right?" He whispered back. "Left seems closer to where the phone signal spiked." I nodded and took the turn. The forest closed in until our lights were the only brightness allowed in the undergrowth. Branches slapped at my face, and my breath shuddered as cold droplets fell from the canopy. I scanned the trees for movement. Twice I thought I saw a shape. Skin gleaming momentarily or a jacket glinting silver like the knife's blade. My pulse pounded. Diaz paused and held up his hand. He pointed to the ground where leaves were disturbed in a spiral pattern, as though someone had dropped and rolled. Next to it lay a single glove, black, fingerless, caked in mud. I picked it up gingerly, slipping it into an evidence bag. No sooner had I sealed the bag than I heard a low, hollow tapping behind us, like someone knocking bark from a tree with a stick. I spun, gun drawn. My light hit nothing but darkness. The tapping stopped. Diaz swallowed audibly. I realized my radio had dropped static. I jabbed the PTT button. "Lewis to dispatch. Come in, please." Only white noise. My stomach lurched. "Dispatch, do you copy? Over." Silence. The foreboding inevitability that we'd been cut off settled over me like a shroud. The orchard of firs behind us seemed to rise, black trunks like pillars in a cathedral, endless and watching. I turned to Diaz. "We're on our own until we get comms back." He nodded, every line of his body rigid. We pressed on. The trail twisted until a gentle incline opened into a second clearing. Moonlight filtered through a break in the canopy, illuminating an abandoned logging shack. The wooden walls were rotted. The roof sagged. Smoke stains arched above the doorway, blackened by a fire long gone cold. A battered pickup bed lay tipped on its side, half sunken in the moss. I crouched at the entrance, light sweeping the interior. Broken pallets, a dented toolbox, and scrawled on the far wall, a word scratched into the wood. "Don't." My breath caught. Diaz moved beside me, shining his light on the letters. "What the—" he started. I sank my pistol back into the holster. "We're getting closer," I whispered, heart pounding. That word could only mean one thing. Whoever Grace encountered left a warning. maybe they didn't make it either. I shone my beam around the shack. No bodies, no blood, no evidence except the glove and the phone. But that warning was alive, as fresh as our footsteps. In the hush, I heard the tapping again, softer this time, coming from above. I trained my light up at the ceiling beams. My chest tightened when the beam glinted on something perched on the rafters. A strand of hair, twisted around a rusty nail. Beneath it, long hair fell like a curtain, and a single eyeball reflected my flashlight's glare, then slipped back into shadow. My breath froze. Diaz gestured behind us. Coworker behind us. We spun. Nothing but the forest's edge. Then, from somewhere deeper in the trees, a woman's scream, torn and distant, like glass shattering. It faded instantly, swallowed by the static forest. My stomach twisted so sharply, I felt sick. I reached for my radio again, static. My flashlight line wavered as I gripped it with both hands. "Let's get out of here," Diaz hissed, eyes wide. I opened my mouth, but no words came. I backed toward the door of the shack, turning the letters "Don't" on the wall into a taunt or a plea. I couldn't tell which. My boots slid on the wet planks, and I stumbled back into the clearing, pounding rain of needles on the roof, as if the forest was tapping on its own dark windows. We crossed the clearing in a dash, slipping through the trees as if they were closing behind us. Every step pounded my heart. We burst back onto the logging trail, struck a frantic rhythm as we retraced our path toward the campfire clearing. When we emerged, the glow of the emergency lights greeted us like a false sunrise. Backup was there. 2 cruisers, forestry vehicles, K9 just disembarking, the dogs straining at their leashes. Radios barked orders and call-outs. I pressed the GPS beacon into the hands of the sergeant who stepped forward. "Signal cut near the shack," I said in a rush. "We lost comms, found glove and voicemail. Someone's marking this place, warning people." The sergeant's brow furrowed. "Oh, we're pulling everyone back to the road. Medic will handle the woman. Logging trail's closed until further notice." He turned to Diaz. "You and Lewis write your reports." I stared at the site of the logging shack one last time. The trees beyond the edge of the emergency lights pressed in, motionless, silent. The K9 barked, straining to be released. I reached into my pocket, fingers brushing the cold steel of the utility knife handle. Tucked inside my jacket, the cracked phone hummed faintly, as if eager to call out again. My pulse slowed, but didn't stop. I realized I was trembling, not from exertion or cold, but from something deep in my bones. The certainty that whatever lurked in those woods wasn't human, and that warning carved on the shack's wall was only the beginning. The emergency lights receded behind me as Diaz and I climbed back into our cruisers, the forest swallowing the glow as we drove toward the county line road. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel, every nerve in my body still thrumming from the chase and the scream echoing in the clearing. We arrived at the makeshift command post, just a cluster of patrol vehicles and an SUV from the Forestry Service, with forensic techs unpacking evidence kits and K9 handlers corralling squirming dogs. I stepped out and inhaled deeply, tasting diesel fumes mixed with damp pine on the wind. In the ambulance bay, the EMTs wheeled our shaken subject onto a gurney. She was wrapped in a foil blanket, eyes glassy, trembling too badly to meet my gaze. Sergeant Morrison approached, arms folded. "Lewis, Diaz, you've been through hell out there. Reports say the shack's message and the glove. Anything else?" I glanced over my shoulder at the dark tree line, still ominous. "That voicemail, she left it 6 days ago," I said, tapping my pocket where the cracked phone buzzed quietly. "Says, they took my phone. Help me. Don't trust the road. It's in the trees. then static. He frowned, brow creasing. And the glove? Diaz held up the evidence bag. Fingerless, muddy, size small, doesn't match our subject's gloves. The sergeant nodded, absorbing it all. We'll hold the scene. Forestry will check for fallen power lines or hazards. We'll review your body cam once you're back. Diaz and I followed him to the forensic tent. Inside, 2 techs were laying out evidence on folding tables under portable lights. The utility knife, the glove, the phone, the scratch on the shack wall. I watched as one tech carefully dusted the knife's handle for prints, while the other used a magnifying lamp to trace the message "Don't," carved into a splintered plank. Every fiber of my being buzzed with questions. Who carved that? Who, or what, had hunted Grace, then tried to warn the next person away? As they worked, the sergeant cleared his throat. "You two get some rest. We'll assign additional resources, first light. You've done more than enough tonight." His tone was kind but weary. He handed us each a fresh bottle of water. "Go home. Sleep. We'll pick this up tomorrow." Home felt like an empty word. My house was an hour's drive away, through more of these same roads I'd just come from. I climbed into my cruiser and watched as Diaz climbed into his. We sat in silence for a long moment, engines idling. Finally, he reached over and tapped the dash. "You good?" I exhaled. "I'm processing." My mind replayed the image of that pale woman in the shadows, her voice rasping through the trees. He nodded. "I've been on patrol 10 years, never felt this primal." We shared a look, understanding that this was beyond a missing person call or trespassing. It was as if the forest itself had turned predatory. I drove off first. Through the winding curves, the silence inside the cruiser was thick. My radio stayed off. My headlights swept along the pavement, and every time they passed a dark clump of trees, I flinched. At one point I slowed, thinking I saw a shape standing on the shoulder, glinting white. But when I passed, it was empty. I gripped the wheel tighter. My pulse hammered in my ears louder than the tires on the road. I spotted a sign. "Welcome to Elk Creek Road. Caution, wildlife crossing next 5 miles." Elk Creek, where the forestry trucks had been blocked by downed trees. I slowed to 10 miles per hour, remembering Grace's warning not to trust the road. But roads were all I had to get home. My phone buzzed. I glanced down. It was Chief Allen, ID flashing on the screen. I ignored it. If I took the call, I knew it would be a litany of questions. Why was I still out? Was I okay? When would I file my report? I needed time to think first. I parked outside my apartment building, a modest 2-story with faded beige siding, and climbed the steps. Inside, I flicked on the lamps, but the light felt too harsh after the forest's shadows. I pulled off my uniform, folded it carefully, and set the badge and pistol on the dresser. My hands trembled so badly I spilled a bottle of water. I showered to wash off the adrenaline, letting hot water pound my shoulders. Steam billowed against the tiles, and I shut my eyes as I replayed every moment. The abandoned Accord, the whispering voice, the runaway woman, that voicemail's final plea. My chest constricted. What had Grace meant by, "It's in the trees"? People? Animals? Something else? No logical explanation fit. My training demanded answers, but reason felt bankrupt here. I dried off and wrapped myself in a robe, heading to the living room. My laptop sat on a small desk. I opened it and connected to my department's secure network. I pulled up the missing persons file for Grace Hollister. 25 years old, lived with her roommate in Ukiah. No significant history of mental health issues, last seen March 8th after a late shift at the diner. The roommate filed the report when Grace failed to show up for work the next day. The timeline matched the voicemail. I typed up notes and uploaded the phone's audio clip. Then I opened the mapping software and plotted Forest Route 12. The logging trails, Ashwood Ridge, Elk Creek Road. I fired off emails to forensic and forestry requesting rundowns and tree fall status. My phone vibrated again, Chief Allen, impatient. I let it ring to voicemail. The digital clock on the desktop read 4:17 a.m. I leaned back, shoulders aching. Sleep was impossible. Instead, I grabbed a notepad and pen. On the top line, I wrote, Objective. Locate Grace Hollister. Identify threat in Mendocino Forest. Under that, analyze voicemail for hidden code. Cross-reference any similar cases. Follow up on forestry's clearance timeline. Secure additional volunteers for search. Filling those lines barely slowed the swirl of panic in my mind. I poured another coffee and moved to the window. Dawn was breaking. Pale gray light filtering through blinds. The street below was empty. Even the usual sound of distant traffic was muted. I stared at the trees edging the horizon, dark against the morning sky. They looked unnatural, stark, silent, waiting. The forest felt like a mouth opening, ready to swallow whoever came too close. By 7 a.m., I was back in uniform, coffee in hand, pulling into the command post at the edge of the roadway. The sergeant nodded as I arrived. Forensics had finished cataloging evidence. Forestry workers were clearing the roadblock on Elk Creek. Chainsaws buzzing in the distance. K9 had found nothing relevant on their track. I handed over my notes. I stayed up all night analyzing the voicemail, I told the sergeant. It might contain a timestamp or code. He raised an eyebrow. What makes you think that? I opened my phone's audio editor and zoomed in on the waveform. Listen. I played a loop just before the final plea. Underneath the crackle of static, there was a faint rhythmic pattern. Tap, tap, pause, tap, almost like Morse code. I transcribed dots and dashes. It spelled underbridge. Silence fell. The sergeant looked at me, then at his watch. There's an old bridge over Elk Creek about a mile down, abandoned, wooden, no guardrails. If Grace tried to cross it, she could have fallen, or something else happened. My heart thumped. We need to check it out now. He snapped his fingers, dispatching 2 units. Diaz rolled up beside me. You cracked the code? He said, impressed. I nodded, adrenaline pumping again. It was hidden under static. I think whoever was with Grace tried to leave a clue. He checked his gear. Let's move. We piled into our cruisers and roared down Elk Creek Road, diesel engines growling. The forest on either side seemed to lean away from the road, forming a narrow, tunnel-like corridor. The sun peeked over ridges, silver shafts of light cutting through the boughs. I toggled my radio, Channel 5, open mic to forestry. Elk Creek Unit, this is Lewis. Bridge site ETA 3 minutes. Any hazards? A forestry tech answered. Bridge cleared. No fallen limbs blocking, but the decking's rotten in places. Proceed with caution. I flicked off my brights and slowed to 20 miles per hour. Milepost 3.2, there it was. The bridge 100 feet ahead, sagging and warped. Wooden planks stenciled with rusted warning signs. Wear protective equipment, though no one had heeded it. The guardrails were half gone. We parked side by side on the shoulder, blue-red lights bathing the structure in harsh color. I grabbed my flashlight, pistol, and the phone still tucked at my belt. Diaz followed with a camera and evidence bag. We stepped onto the deck. The wood groaned under our weight. Shadows flickered below through missing boards. The creek water churned black and fast, frothing white at the rocks. I swept my light along the rails. Scratch marks. Long, diagonal gashes gouged into the supports. Fresh wood splinters on the ground. Whoever had been here didn't go quietly. I crouched and found footprints in damp earth at the bridge's lip. One set of boots, two sets of sneaker tread, plus small, child-size impressions. My throat tightened. I stood and shone the light across the deck. A single planks ahead, I saw something red smeared across the gray wood. I knelt, dark dried blood, and next to it a scrap of cloth, a floral pattern matching Grace's jacket from the Accord seat. Grace tried to cross, I murmured. She got here, then something attacked her. Diaz took photos. I pocketed the cloth into the evidence bag. My hand shook so violently I had to steady the bag with both hands. If she fell through or was dragged off, she's somewhere near the creek. I scanned the rail plank gaps. The creek churned 10 feet below. I could almost see her face in the swirl, eyes wide in terror. My stomach lurched. I shook my head to clear it. We start grid search downstream. Every 10 feet look for clothing, blood, footprints. He nodded, stepping back toward the cruiser to call it in. I unclipped the phone and checked its screen. Dead, battery nearly exhausted. I tapped power. The cracked glass flickered on. One more voicemail indicator, timestamped March 10th. Heart pounding, I pressed play. A rough male voice. Grace, I'm sorry. They made me. Please, bury me under the bridge. Static, then a sob. I pressed stop. The words echoed in my mind. They made me. Bury me. Then the forest grew silent again. Something shifted above the bridge, branches swaying though there was no wind. I looked up. There, on the far rail, perched like a grotesque sentry, was the outline of a woman's figure, crouched, ankles resting on the wood, hands gripping the beam. The morning light backlit tangled hair, and a pale face turned away. My breath caught. Diaz, get down here, I yelled. But the figure sprang backward, skating off the rail and into the trees in one sudden fluid motion. A spray of needles rained onto the bridge as she vanished. My pistol was out of the holster in a heartbeat, beam darting into the brush. Nothing. Only the suffocating stillness of pines. I swallowed and tapped my radio. Dispatch, this is Lewis. Bridge is clear, no sign of subject. I need a full search team, deputies, forestry rangers, and get a rescue tilt rotor if needed. I think Grace, or whoever it was, went off North Bank. My voice sounded calm, but inside I was shaking. I looked at the shattered railing and the smear of blood. The forest beyond beckoned like a dark invitation. The question burned in my mind louder than everything. What else had been buried under that bridge? I stepped off the cracked planks of the bridge onto the bank's muddy shore. Flashlight slicing a cone of illumination into the underbrush. The moment I set foot on solid ground, I felt it. A vibration underfoot, as if the earth itself was aware of our intrusion. Diaz flanked me, his breath ragged but controlled. I keyed my mic. Dispatch, Lewis, advise. This north bank is clear of immediate hazards. We're initiating grid search downstream and upstream, 20-yard intervals. Over. Only static answered. The roar of the creek filled the silence as we moved apart. Flashlights bobbing across tangled roots and collapsed logs. The air was colder here, damp seeping through our uniforms, carrying the stench of decay just beneath its surface. Every footfall crackled bone-dry branches. Every breath felt like an alarm announcing our presence. I reminded myself of protocol. Mark every find, call it in, preserve the scene. But logic and training were perilously close to being overwhelmed by fear. We split downstream first. Diaz angled left toward a tangle of alders. I angled right toward a sloping bank dotted with moss-covered stones. My light settled on a glint of metal near the water's edge. a fragment of a mirror. Edges jagged, face oxidized. Bending, I recognized the initials etched in the corner, GH matching Grace Hollister's driver's license photo. My heart throbbed. I bagged it carefully. As I stood, I glanced back toward the bridge, its silhouette perched above like a predator's teeth. A shiver crawled up my spine. I radioed Diaz. Found mirror shard with initials. Repeat. Initials match Hollister. How copy? His voice crackled back. Copy, Lewis. I'm marking 3 more footprints near a downed log, 2 sneaker treads and 1 boot print leading toward the water. He sounded clinical, but I heard the tremor. Keep at it, I instructed, scanning the water line. Driftwood bobbed in the current. Branches tangled with string, as if someone had tried to rig a trap. I followed a narrow slide of wet earth toward where the footprints led. The hunting dogs had moved in after us, sniffing at the shoreline. I frowned. No barking, no alert. I whispered into the mic, "Hold, K9. This feels odd." The dogs' silent reserve deepened the unease, as if even they recognized this place was tainted. Around the next bend, water churned against a submerged bank. Broken tree roots gnarled like skeletal fingers reaching out. And there, half hidden under a tangle of branches, I saw a shape. My light trembled as I shone it on a pale hand protruding from the muck. Fingers curled into the mud. I pressed the beam up the forearm. A sleeve stained red and brown, fabric matching the floral scrap from the bridge. I swallowed bile. "Diaz," I rasped. "I have visual." Body in the creek bed. My radio was heavy in my hand. He jogged in, shining his light beside mine. The figure was Grace, her hair fanned in the water, eyes closed, her face serene in death. My chest tightened, vision narrowing as if the forest itself had constricted around me. I knelt, checking for a pulse I knew wouldn't be there, a futile gesture. The water lapped around her, carrying away the blood, the clothing, washing her from this world. I felt a hollow ache, the breath gone from my lungs. Diaz covered her with the backup blanket, and I bowed my head. But then, a crack. From upstream, a snapping twig. We both looked toward the sound, heartbeats sinking in terror. The forest stood, a silent witness to her body beneath the water. The creek burbled, mocking our helplessness. I forced a breath, trying to steady the pistol in my hand. Protocol demanded securing the scene, waiting for homicide detectives. But I couldn't stay. Something drew me upstream again. We left Grace in the shallow water and retraced our path toward the bridge, boots slipping on slick roots. Each step a grim reminder that we were intruders in her final moments. The mirror shard, glove, knife, phone, all evidence of a struggle that ended here. But struggle with what? Not a person, not a wild animal, something else. The instinct screamed at me. Don't trust reality. At the bridge, Diaz hesitated. "Lewis, you sure we want to go back in there?" I stared up at the dark rafters, the scratch of "don't" still etched into the wood. Then I noticed new markings. Thin, precise lines forming symbols I couldn't decipher. They weren't random. They curled and looped like script, faint but deliberate. My breath stuttered. "It's a message," I said, voice hollow. Another warning or a taunt. A sudden gust of wind rattled the timbers above, scattering rotten leaves onto the deck. The forest seemed to exhale, inhaling us into its depths. Diaz edged toward me. "We call this in," he said. "We leave it." But his eyes betrayed fascination, horror and awe intertwined. I nodded, raising the radio. But before I could press the button, my phone buzzed in my pocket, illuminating the cracked screen, unknown number calling. My breath caught. I hadn't had service here in days. I I clicked it open, expecting scratchy static or nothing. "Officer Lewis?" The voice was Grace's. Clear, alive, director, even drowned, even dead. Her voice carried across space and time to me. "Help me." The call dropped before I could respond. The phone screen went dark. I stared at it as if I'd hold it together, but my hand shook so badly I had to brace myself against the railing. Diaz watched, frozen. The forest pressed in, deeper and darker than ever. I realized then that no grid search, no rescue, no homicide team would contain this. Something in these woods, or under the bridge, or within the static of that voicemail, was beyond rational explanation. Grace's body was here, but her voice was somewhere else, still trapped between the living and the dead. I felt the forest slip into my bones, whispering its unfinished story, and I understood that I could never leave this behind because it would follow me home, into every silent hour, every shadow. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and turned off my flashlight. The emergency lights blinking behind us cast long, wavering shadows across the bridge's warped boards, and I realized the road had vanished. The pines crowded in so closely I could see each needle, hear each breath they drew. I stepped forward, toward the dark loop upstream. Diaz reached for my arm, his grip firm. "Sarah, we have to go." But I couldn't walk away, not yet. Not until I knew what Grace meant when she said, "It's in the trees," and not until I answered the question echoing in the cracking timber overhead. Who, or what, had marked that message, and who would be the next to hear the forest's call? I exhaled, cold air bursting from my lungs. "One more look," I whispered, a voice barely my own. Diaz met my eyes, conflicted, and nodded. Together, we stepped back onto the bridge. Do we cross into daylight or into something far darker still? We crossed the rickety planks of the bridge one by one, the wood groaning under our weight as though protesting our return. The morning light had shifted, the sun rising higher, but here beneath the fir canopy the forest remained dim, fetid, and watchful. My flashlight bobbed ahead of me, illuminating the warped rails and the message, faint now, etched into the far beam. Those looping symbols I still could not read. Every step felt heavier than the last. Diaz fell in step beside me, voice low. "This is insane," he muttered, eyes flicking to every trembling shadow. "We shouldn't be back here." I didn't answer, because I could not bring myself to tear my gaze away from the symbols or the way the forest pressed inward as if to prevent our retreat. The air was thick with moisture and something fouler, an undercurrent of rot that tugged at my limbs. I realized the static of the phone's messages, the echo of Grace's voice, and these carvings all pointed to a truth I resisted acknowledging. We were trespassing on something ancient and malevolent. Halfway across the span, I sensed movement in my peripheral vision. A figure stepping just beyond the beam's reach, then vanishing. My heart slammed against my ribs. I snapped the beam around, trying to pick out a lone person, an animal, but nothing. The fog that clung to the creek below had crept up the supports, wisps curling around each board. A bead of sweat ran down my temple. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Diaz shone his light along the rail. "Not now," he hissed, then clicked off his torch, plunging us into darkness lit only by my dim beam. "We go slow," he said. "Keep comms open." I tapped the radio. Static. Again, no response. In the silence, the groan of the old timbers sounded like a distant scream. Past the midpoint, the carvings took on fresh depth, as though someone had returned under the cover of rain to retrace them. Droplets slid from the boards, falling with a hollow click onto the deck. I knelt and traced a finger over one looping curve. It felt warm to the touch, as though the wood itself had a pulse. My mind flashed to Grace's voicemail. "Help me. Don't trust the road. It's in the trees." Now I understood that the carvings were not intended as a warning, but as an invitation, a map, a chant, an invocation. And we had answered. The far bank loomed, sodden soil and a tangle of roots descending into the creek. I set my jaw and took the final step off the bridge. My boot sank into wet earth, and a tremor ran up my spine. The forest beyond seemed impossibly still, the trees standing as silent sentinels. Diaz landed beside me, flashlight raised in both hands. We were back on solid ground, but the sense of safety was an illusion. The tape of my radio crackled once, then fell silent again. No backup, no dispatch, no reassurance. "Stay close," I said. "We comb east and west from here, then head back to the shack." But the moment I spoke, a distant chant drifted through the trees, a low, rhythmic murmur that sounded like voices in the wind. I froze. Diaz paled beside me. "Did you hear that?" I nodded. The chant repeated, indistinct but unmistakably human. We moved east, boots sliding in the mud, flashlight cutting through the undergrowth. The chant drew nearer, 4 beats, pause, repeating like a heartbeat. My throat went dry. "Stop," I ordered. We crouched behind a fallen log. There, illuminated by my wavering beam, was a circle of totems. Carved sticks planted in the earth around a shallow pit. Animal skulls, stones scratched with the same symbols as the bridge, and strips of cloth, some matching the floral pattern from Grace's jacket, others dark and sodden. My stomach churned. Diaz swallowed. "This is a ritual site," he breathed. "They did something here." My hand found the utility knife still in my pocket. I considered cutting one of the cloth strips for evidence, but I feared that any disturbance might trigger something, an echo of the forest's will. Instead, I crouched and whispered into the mic, "This is Lewis. I found a ritual site. Skulls, symbols, totems. Coordinates unknown. I need immediate backup." Static. No answer. The chant grew louder now, as though someone had picked up a drum and was chanting in tandem with the wind. I felt the air vibrate. "We need to move," I told Diaz, reaching for his arm. But before we could turn, a shape emerged at the edge of the circle. A woman's silhouette, long hair plastered to her face, ragged clothing clinging to her frame. Her skin was too pale, her eyes too black. She held Grace's phone in one hand, the cracked screen lit with the voicemail prompt. In the other hand, a ceremonial dagger carved from flint. The chant intensified, echoing through the pines. My pistol came free of its holster before I realized I had drawn it. I aimed, my voice cracking, "State Patrol!" "Drop the weapon." She tilted her head, tilting the phone so the screen faced me. The voicemail icon pulsed. She raised the dagger. There was no malice in her movement, only sorrow. A tragic inevitability. I hesitated. If I fired, would the forest itself erupt in vengeance? My partner's whisper cut through the canopy. "Don't." At that moment, the circle of totems lit up. Small flames flickering from moss-soaked sticks. The flames formed without spark or match, breathing light onto the symbols in a sickly green glow. The woman began to chant in a voice that was both hers and the wind, each syllable echoing off trunks, an ancient lament. Firelight danced on the skulls, making their empty eye sockets seem alive. I swallowed as the world narrowed to the space between us, a space charged like a drawn bowstring. I raised the phone from my belt. Grace's voice crackled. The voicemail played on a loop. "They made me, bury me, under the bridge." The woman wavered, as if tortured by her own memories. The flames flickered and died, leaving us in darkness. One last echo of the chant, and she dropped the dagger, eyes locked on mine. "Free me," she whispered, voice brittle. Then she slipped into the trees, mangled footfalls swallowing her as though she'd never existed. Diaz and I stood motionless, heartbeats loud in our ears. The ritual site went dark, the totems toppling inward like sunken ships. The earth swallowed the remains. We looked at each other, pale-faced. I tapped the mic again. Nothing. No static, no voice, just the forest's heavy breathing. I slipped the phone into my pocket. "We leave, now." Diaz nodded, and we backed away from the pit, stepping over roots and skull fragments. Behind us, the trees seemed to lean in, watching. We reached the bridge together, but I did not look back. I dared not. We climbed aboard and started across, each board a final step away from a threshold we should never have crossed. When we reached the far side, daylight broke through the canopy as though the forest itself exhaled and released us. Diaz exhaled a shaky laugh. We made it. I forced a nod, shoulders trembling. The forest fell into normal rhythm. Birdsong, the hum of insects, the rustle of wind. But in my mind, the chant still reverberated. The carved symbols burned behind my eyes. Back at the command post, I filed my report with major crimes. They shook their heads at the mentions of carvings and totems, preferring the sanitized version: missing person, accidental death, possible foul play, under investigation. They booked the knife, glove, mirror shard, anything physical. I handed over Grace's phone for digital forensics, but I held back the true story. That night, in my apartment, I locked every door and window and left the TV on loud. I lay awake, memorizing the symbols, reconstructing the chant. I feared sleep, knowing that any dream might lure me back to those trees. The voicemail icon glowed faintly on my nightstand, because I refused to erase it. I tested the phone again. No service. Yet, sometimes in the dead of night, I swear I hear the drip of blood, the echo of that final plea. They'll close this case soon. They'll decide she wandered off the bridge by accident or was taken by someone. They'll chalk it up to tragedy. But I know what I saw. A ritual older than any human law, a sacrifice written in symbols, an invocation of something that dwells in the interstice between life and death. And I know that once invited, it never forgets. So I ask myself, and now I ask you, when you see a dark forest road and hear a faint voice on a dead phone, would you answer? Would you step off the beaten path into the trees? Because if you do, it might answer back, and then, whose voice would you truly be listening to?